We on? I'll count to 20. Rolling. Chill. Good evening, everyone. We'd like to reconvene in an open session. First and foremost, I'd like to thank each and every one of you that's here tonight to participate in any or all the upcoming discussions. If Commissioner's okay, I'd like to skip Commissioner's reports and comments at this time. And Mr. Slocum, can we bypass the reports from staff at the moment, or do you have something pending you and Sarah would like to mention first?
We can postpone those for the time being.
Is that okay? If there's something imminent, we would gladly do it. All right, we'll postpone them. What I'd like to do now is to go into citizens' participation, and I'd like to start with the front row. Whoever would like to participate, please come forward, give your name and address. Front row. Anyone in the front row? Sir, please give your name and address.
Okay, my name's Ron Horn, 181 Stanford Road, Hagerstown, Maryland. I'm just here, I'm a member of the ESAC committee, and I would like to say that, we are really hardly studying the fire plan also, and I know that's going to be discussed tonight. But one thing that I would like to do is to extend Mr. Slocum an invitation to our county association meetings. Since you've been here, we haven't seen you, and it would be nice, and I think it would be very important for you to attend them to see what's going on and understand some of the things that we are discussing. And it's nothing against you, it's just something I haven't noticed you there, and it would be nice.
Thank you for the
We can
Thank
bring
you
him
for
to
the
the ESAC
invitation.
meeting as well. How about that?
Yep.
All right. Thank you, sir. Anyone else from the front row? All those people in the front row, holy cow. Second row, would anyone like to come forward for citizens' participation? Second row, Mr. Fishak, please come forward. Name and address for the record, sir.
My name is Glenn Fishak. I live at 13134 Bickle Road, and I'm here as past president of the association. I was here when we did the EMS plan that's in effect now, and yes, it lasted a little while, but the plans that you're going to see here this evening, I think is very good. And by making them county employees. And then also the fair plan, if we put a person in the station around the clock in every station in Washington County, we are covered. We are covered. You won't have any more failures. And as far as the volunteers, I think the volunteers will pick up. I think we can get more volunteers, but I just want to address this to you and want you to really think about it. We have the best system in the county, in which we do not use. We have our people go to school when they go to 11th and 12th grade. They go out to the academy. When they come out of there, they're firefighter twos, qualified by the University of Maryland, and they're EMTs. Why are we looking about hiring these people? These are the backbone of our county, in which you are helping to pay for. So at that, I just want to thank you. I want you to really look at the plan, and I'm sure it's going to be more discussions on it, and for companies also to open their books up. So I thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else in the second row would like to come forward for citizens' participation? How about the third row? Anybody in the third row would like to come forward? Moving on, fourth row. Hey, we're going to get out of here early. Holy cow. Anyone in the fifth row like to come forward? Please come on back down, sir. Name and address for the record.
My name is Kevin Rowe. Address is 1977 Lancashire Drive, Rockville, Maryland, 20854. I'll be very brief. President Klein, commissioners, and staff, I sent an email a couple days ago notifying of some challenges and delays that we are facing with our event venue and winery off Raven Rock Road. Admittedly, when I emailed you, I wasn't seeing a positive direction, and we are encountering some delays. I just wanted to explain what's happened since. Within a matter of hours on Monday morning, Ashley Holloway at Permitting and Zoning rallied the troops, brought in every senior engineer and past director, Mr. Lung. We had our engineers there, and we feel that we've made a tremendous amount of progress, and it's really been with them rallying the troops and supporting us. And I just wanted to say that I feel that we do have a way to get this back on track, and I hope that by the end of the year, we're back on track, we're booking for 2020, and we're moving forward stronger than ever. And I just wanted to say thank you. The team really rallied together, and I see a nice path forward, and just wanted to give you an update on that.
Thank you for those very positive comments. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Again, anyone here would like to participate in citizens' participation, just come on forward. Anyone in the gallery? Anyone else would like to speak? Anyone in any of the other back rows? Moving forward, fifth, last row. Anyone else would like to speak at citizens' participation? Okay, seeing none. Commissioners, would you think it'd be appropriate to move about 15 minutes early and go into Mr. Hayes' presentation? Any thoughts or suggestions on that? Be okay?
I'm me.
All right, Mr. Hayes.
Good evening, everyone. How are you?
Director, would you introduce your panel with you then, and we move forward?
So to my immediate right, we have Kingsley Poole, his co-chair of the Emergency Services Advisory Council, and to his immediate right is Bob Moncrief, the president of the Washington County Volunteer Fire and Rescue Association, and of course, David Hayes, director of Emergency Services.
Thank you.
Okay, so over the last several weeks and really over the last several months, we've came before the board in response to requests that we've received from the volunteer fire and rescue community and through the Volunteer Fire and Rescue Association to work for a possible solution and try to help augment the staffing issues that are plaguing the volunteer services throughout Washington County. And as we've stated before, and I certainly want to be clear to state again, this is not an issue that is just specific to Washington County. It is throughout the state of Maryland and most certainly throughout the United States. So we're here trying to put forth a positive plan to help them meet today's challenges for fire and rescue services. So the report in brief is the Division of Emergency Services and the Washington County Volunteer Fire and Rescue Association have evaluated options for consideration and moving forward with implementation of Phase 2 of the Strategic Firefighter Staffing Plan and Phase 2 of the EMS Master Plan. In doing so, a survey was sent, as we had spoke to last earlier this month to each volunteer fire and EMS company in the City of Hagerstown Fire Department. The goal of the survey was to solicit feedback from the companies. The discussion is the Board of County Commissioners, the board, has long maintained financial support to the independent volunteer fire and EMS departments throughout the county. Without this financial support, the volunteer fire and EMS companies would likely be unable to maintain operations in today's environment. Currently, the Division of Emergency Services has received requests from 18 of the possible 21 volunteer departments who expressed their desire to obtain career staffing from the county to help meet today's service delivery challenges. In total, 11 fire departments and all 8 EMS departments have requested that the commissioners provide them with Phase 2 staffing of each respective plan. With the stated results of the surveys, our office is recommending consideration be given for the submission of an application for a staffing for adequate fire and emergency response, otherwise known as a SAFER grant. As stated previously, the SAFER grant program is provided through the Federal Emergency Management Agency and is intended to help jurisdictions in need of additional firefighter assistance. The grant application was opened on February 15th and will subsequently close on March 22nd. If a SAFER grant is awarded to Washington County, the anticipated timeline for award notification should be in June of 2019. The Division of Emergency Services is now positioned and ready to make an application if given such direction. Unfortunately, the SAFER grant program described above will not be permitted to be utilized for EMS staffing. Full implementation for Phase 2 of the firefighter staffing plan will require the hiring of 60 firefighters and 2 supervisors. Our office is recommending consideration for hiring 32 firefighters under the SAFER grant for FY 2020. The year 1 and 2 costs respectively for the 32 firefighters under the SAFER grant is $625,221.40 for each year. For years 3 and 4, we recommend that a reprioritization of the FY 22 and future years apparatus fleet replacement CIP budget be considered, allowing the yearly $800,000 to be used to offset future costs as the SAFER grant expires. This offset will reduce the additional general budget allocation requirements for years 3 and 4, requiring $200,354.24 in FY 22, and then an additional $875,309.96 in FY 23. There will also be a $175,000 firefighter staffing subsidy return from the 7 stations who received the full-time county staffing in the first year. Consideration could be given for an additional staffing subsidy to the departments who are already paying corporation staffing and have requested full-time county staffing, however, will not be receiving full-time county firefighters in years 1 through 3. This additional staffing subsidy would help cover the current out-of-pocket expenses for those departments. This effort will help to provide a financial bridge that will help create a fair and equitable solution until the county can reapply for a second SAFER grant in 3 years, at that point providing full-time county staffing as requested. Fully implementing Phase 2 of the EMS staffing plan would also require hiring or absorbing up to 104 EMS staff, many of whom are currently working for the volunteer EMS companies today. With all 8 EMS companies expressing a desire to merge their current EMS staff as county employees, consideration of moving in this scenario is of critical importance at this time. It has also been discussed that additional financial reviews for the fire and EMS companies who receive taxpayer funding should be implemented as additional funding and staffing opportunities are brought forth. Consideration for any costs associated with these additional financial reporting requirements could be covered in part by the $175,000 that was previously allocated for firefighter staffing subsidies as identified above. Additional program development should continue to occur that further promotes incentives for our active volunteer and fire EMS responders. These efforts will prove invaluable in maintaining efficiencies within emergency services as we move forward over time. We should continue efforts to find other opportunities in program development that could further promote volunteer responder interest. The fiscal impact, Phase 2 fire, year 1, $625,221.40. Phase 2 EMS is $2.5 million. And that is after pulling back the EMS subsidies and part of the net billing revenues. And then the concurrences are as listed, and the alternatives will be to continue with the current funding and staffing levels. And the attachments that you have in your possession are the volunteer surveys, both fire and EMS, and the updated firefighter cost for 2019. So the other thing we're going to go into is a little presentation to talk about what dollars and cents currently are out in the volunteer fire and rescue community. So really what we want to decide and pull out of this slideshow is where are the numbers and what do they tell us about the current needs. This fail rate breakdown addresses the 2014 county resolution that states each department is required to maintain a 95% response performance as a benchmark for all of their first out calls. And what you do not see on this one, and I have before me, is the addition of the fourth quarter stats. We did not have that ready, and I didn't get it up for the packet in time. But you can already see all the yellow represents departments that are outside of that 95% threshold. And more specifically, and you'll know this from previous conversations, and they're represented in the audience here, so they can certainly speak if they think, is Potomac Valley. They were the first department to come forward and recognize that we're going to have to do something different than what we did yesterday to provide sustainable firefighter and EMS staffing. And then you have, of course, our most recent addition back into the service arena is the Community Volunteer Fire Company. And then the fourth quarter results have Boonesboro, their main station in Boonesboro. It has Potomac Valley again, and then we have Mount Etna entering into a threshold that's above the 5%. So you can see the numbers aren't consistently changing, and it's fairly consistent. The one thing that I'd draw your attention to is it does indicate that most of the issues plague the departments that don't have the larger communities to pull from. The Potomac Valley is the Fairplay, now Mount Etna. So it's not saying that any of the other departments are absolved of those same issues, but that seems to be part of the trend that we're starting to see. So this graph represents, the blue line represents light responses, which means a fire apparatus went out and had less than the 3 required firefighters. And then the red line is a driver-only indicator, and you'll see another graph that better reflects that. But the real importance of this graph, if you see originally in 2015, that number looked to be about 53.1%. And then in May of 2016, we changed the benchmark of measurement from 4 firefighters as the requirement to 3, and we saw an immediate drop to 36.2%. But you can see over the corresponding 2 years, that number continues to rise again. This graph is a better representation of those numbers. The blue, again, is the light responses, and the red are driver only. And just to move through this without a huge delay, that number sits around a 40% average of all calls that are responded go out light, which means they have 1 or 2 firefighters on it. And the red indicates about 20% of all calls go out driver only. The next chart shows the initiative that the commissioners authorized the division in 2017 October to start using our part-time staff out in the volunteer stations. The benchmark we have is about 1,400 hours a month that we have funding available to provide staffing to the volunteer fire departments based on their request when they know that they don't have either a volunteer driver or a corporation driver. You can see that number continues to go up. The top line is the amount of requests received. The bottom line is the number of requests that we're able to fulfill. So as you can see in February 19, we received about 1,821, and we were able to fulfill about 1,821. But prior to that, we received 2,300, and we're only able to cover about 1,483 of those. And again, for March of 19, that number is 2,487. So these are the things that tell us that the system needs help. The system's now asking for help, and we're in a position where we have to consider that. So the question becomes, where are we now? And really that goes to the financial picture that's already expended. And I want to bring attention that there's already significant dollars and cents that are invested on behalf of the commissioners out into the volunteer community. And that number is just north of $7 million, just short of $7.2 million to be specific. The next slide will show us a breakdown of where those monies are mostly spent. And so the appropriations to company is just over $5 million. Firehouse Software is an incident reporting program. It's $47,000. The volunteer stipend programs are $75,000. Insurance, which is vehicle, property, and casualty, is $589,200. We were able to realize some savings in the current renewal, so I'm happy to report that that number is going to decrease next year. And then medical fees are $80,000. And then some of the bigger numbers that are kind of lost in the weeds, we lose track of them sometimes, is our LOSAP, or Length of Service Awards Program. That's a $600,000 annual contribution. And then the workers' compensation for the volunteer responders is $643,500. And then our additional insurance is a total of about $37,000. So big numbers that are already going out. The next slides will tell you about where those contributions go. They're described in direct and indirect contribution. This one talks about the indirect contributions, and that's the funding of yearly ladder pump and hose testing of $90,000, cardiac monitor defibrillator maintenance of $75,000, and then just last budget year we funded a full-time position for recruitment and retention coordinator. And that position works directly for the Washington County Volunteer Fire and Rescue Association. And that's a continuation of a program that began 4 years ago through a federal grant program, and they've seen positive results in the recruitment numbers. The unfortunate story to that is even with those efforts, we still see the system continue to experience an increased problem putting firefighters and EMS folks on ambulances and fire trucks. The next station we're going to go on by, that just lists the 15 county volunteer fire stations and then the 6 volunteer fire stations in the Hagerstown Fire Department. And I actually need to correct myself. It's 5 stations, 6 departments in the Hagerstown Fire Department. So with the fire services, they're a direct general financial contribution, and these numbers tie back into that $5 million general allocation you saw 3 slides ago. Each county company gets $48,000, and each city station, the 6 city stations inside the corporate limits, each get $24,000. And then in 2015, there was a firefighter staffing subsidy that came forward of about $425,000, and $375,000 of that goes to each of the volunteer fire stations for a total of $25,000 to each. The next slide talks about the EMS stations. There are 8 total EMS companies that operate out of 6 stations. The Williamsport Volunteer Fire and EMS and the Halfway Fire and EMS both operate out of the same station. They're co-located, so that's why we only have 6 physical stations outside of the previous 15 that you saw on the fire slide. For EMS, the same direct general contribution of $48,000 comes forward, and then there's EMS staffing subsidies of $2,026,000. Those came on board in 2009, which allowed the EMS companies to hire their own staffing, provide benefits and health insurance and vacation and paid sick time. And then again, there is an additional firefighter staffing subsidy of $25,000 that goes to 2 of those EMS stations, and that is indicative of the second service that they provide, and that is tied directly into the rescue squad, which is the vehicle that typically carries the jaws of life out of those stations. So the volunteer incentives that we currently have, we have a tuition stipend program. One of those is available through the Maryland State Firemen's Association. We talked about the funding to it, the LOSAP program, Length of Service Awards Program, and then we have the income tax subtraction modification. I believe the current year is $4,750, and that's available through the state of Maryland. And then proposed, or at least in discussion that we've had current and even in past years, is there additional cash that should be considered? We talked about the creativity of thinking outside the box, and one of the things we talked about was a mobile phone, because one size fits all isn't necessarily the correct stipend program going forward. So what motivates a 16 and 18-year-old is probably not the same thing that motivates the 40 or 50-year-old. One of the current initiatives the association has brought forward in their budget request is a term life insurance policy for each volunteer that earns 50 points. And then we're really digging down deep and trying to look at other ideas, because we talked a lot about staffing and the need for staffing, but that's the one leg of the stool. There are at least 2 other legs. One is the financial needs of the departments for facilities and infrastructure, and then the other one would be volunteer incentives that we're talking about here. So getting into the staffing that we're talking about that was referenced in the agenda request, in Phase 1, which is what we talked about, the MS staffing subsidy of $2,026,000, that came forward as we talked about in 2009. But Phase 2 is where we're sitting today, at least with a request, and that basically would merge the county's or the EMS department's corporation staff and its county employees, and then we'd have to hire at least some additional above that to meet the staffing needs because we have some people that are working in multiple stations. So the cost for that and the numbers, as you see, are somewhere around 108 EMS staff. The total cost for that would be somewhere around $8.7 million. And understand some of these numbers are not exact only because we don't know what those salaries would be, where those folks are in a salary scale once that we were to talk about bringing them over. We believe there's about $6.3 million in recoverable revenue. That would be the $2,026,000 in EMS staffing subsidies, and then about $4 million in the billing revenue that we would ask to pull back to help pay for these salaries, and that's the charges that the EMS companies submit to third-party insurance carriers, Medicare, Medicaid, and likewise. So it would require basically the number in red, $2.4 million of additional new revenue to bring that entire system over to the county. The Strategic Firefighter Staffing Plan, which was adopted as a roadmap by the Commissioners in October 2017, brought Phase 1 to life in 2017, and that was the hiring of 8 full-time firefighters, which allowed us to move the 23 part-time staff we used at Special Operations out into the volunteer fire stations. That program is functioning. You saw that several slides ago when we looked at the 2,486 hours that were requested, and we were able to fulfill a smaller number than that. But Phase 2 is the request that we have in hand today and is being brought forth on behalf of the Volunteer Fire Rescue Group, and that would essentially look to hire 60 full-time firefighters, the two full-time battalion chiefs. And again, if we were to exercise that at any one time or any large part at any given time, it would be our encouragement that commissioners consider application of a SAFER grant for that to exercise those federal dollars. Again, here's the cost for it. 60 firefighters represents just short of $4.6 million. And then in the fiscal year 2019 budget, here's a breakdown of everything the division oversees. You see the $7.1 million at the bottom in green, that's the volunteers. The rest of these line items are directly within the division itself. And again, if you look at the top fire operations, just want to highlight what's included in that. That's where the current full and part-time firefighter salaries are. In the EMS operations, there are 8 full-time paramedics in that. Emergency management has the director and emergency planner salaries and all the other programs that follow through that. But our big dollar expense certainly is the line in the room, and that's for the 911 center, and that's just short of $5 million a year. And then the others that are special operations, just short of $80,000. And then what was previous the air unit, which is now the emergency support services, and that's just short of $40,000. So that represents our entire budget forward and back. So closing out this particular part of the presentation, the challenges we're looking at obviously is what we spoke to, the fail rates and the staffing to help address some of those fail rates. And then again, we talked about the other legs of the stool, and that's the apparatus facilities. And then what we know it's going to take is some type of sustainable revenue to pay for this stuff. We recognize it's not cheap, and certainly it is a daunting challenge for the commissioners. And that concludes that part of our presentation. And at this point, I think we'll open it to any questions. We do have some other handouts that are included, and that really just talks about the breakouts of the cost. If you come to the back of your packet, you'll see several spreadsheets. One is your summary of your EMS and fire surveys. And again, we talked about 3 departments. Fire did not request current Phase 2 staffing from the county, but support the initiative and recognize that they'd like to see something in place at such time they should happen to fall into that category, need some assistance. They want to know that the program's up and running and ready to move. And again, all 8 EMS companies have given affirmative towards that. If you look at the next spreadsheet in your packet, that is for all, that would be for all the staffing that was requested from the 12 stations. That would take a total of 48 firefighters to do that. We also are trying to address a short staffing issue with the airport, and one of the conversations we've been looking at is bringing the airport fire station under the division and using the horsepower that we would have with additional staffing to help solve some of the ongoing struggles they've had of coming up with enough firefighters. And then again, the 2 daytime battalion chiefs that are identified in the original Phase 2 plan. But the using the SAFER grant, if that was an avenue we went forward with, that would take $1,008,318.40. And then we believe there would be a consideration that could be given to offset that cost using the $300,000 savings from a return of the firefighter staffing from the departments that would get a county full-time staff. And that would make that cost potentially $708,318.40. But the recommendation we're bringing forward is the next page, and that is recommending hiring 28 firefighters for the volunteer stations, 2 airport firefighters, and 2 daytime battalion chiefs. The SAFER grant cost, if that's the approach we took and this was exercised, is $625,221.40. And again, we would recommend consideration of using the firefighter subsidy staffing return at this time with the stations we'd apply. There would only be $175,000, and that would make that cost $450,221.40. And then we move over and we talk about the EMS. This gives you a breakdown of what we're talking about. If you look at the spreadsheet, it talks about 1 ambulance in each of the stations with the exception of Halfway. We put a dayside medic unit in Halfway, which mimics the system as it sits today. And then Community Rescue Service has 5 staffed ambulances and then an ALS chase supervisor. So this basically represents the system as it is today. Smithsburg EMS is providing another component, but we're not sure that's sustainable and certainly may not be sustainable in a plan going forward. So we do not have that addressed in this particular presentation. But those costs that we just spoke to represent about $8.7 million. Pulling the revenue recovery back of 6.3 leaves an approximated unfunded balance of $2,443,829.70. And if you look at the last sheet, that's what really drove some of the revenue recovery discussions, and we tried to build some type of matrix that would tell us if this, then that. And you've seen this sheet before. What I am happy to report here tonight in consultation with this discussion is the billing rates in the center section of the sheet that varied in some cases company to company. There was a motion at an ALS subsidy meeting to standardize all of those rates, and to my understanding, all companies have done so or are in the process of doing so. So that's a positive step. The other thing we talked about was the variation in the billing company's percent that they take for their services, which is the third-party billing. They have also voted unanimously to have the Division of Emergency Service explore the possibility of a single countywide billing contract. So we're going down some really positive roads here, things that we hadn't been able to get a lot of traction on for various reasons over the years. But I think what you're seeing here and what I would advocate is you're seeing one team with one mission. Everybody understands it takes us all to make this work, and that includes the group sitting before me. So outside of that, if you have any questions, I'll certainly try to answer those. I'm sure there probably are. And I want to turn it over to the group next to me for comment if they'd so choose. And
Can I ask you a question before you move on, Dave?
Sure.
Just a clarification on the SAFER grant. You're proposing, well, you're recommending 32 firefighters. I guess the first question, because can you absorb and train and hire 32 firefighters that quick, or?
So the reason we are only looking at 32 and not the 48,
Right.
Obviously there's a financial side of that consideration as well, but that's about as big as we think we can handle right now. And that's going to take work, but we have 6 months to do that. So the way we would do that, we have 180 days from the date of notification of the award. So what we would do is try to hire 15 in a first round in the first 3 months, and then immediately move into hiring the additional 15. We would be doing, and you've heard, if you've watched any of the mayor and council meetings, and he's back in the audience here, Chief Lord, talk about the pool of available firefighters is difficult to find. So I'm not telling you that this will not present challenges. It will. but I don't think they're a reason to not try to move forward if, again, this is something that financially we can do.
Is there a time limit on, like we have, it's good for 3 years. After 3 years, the county picks up the tab for the
Right.
firefighters. And then you have another SAFER grant, which would pick up more firefighters.
Yes, you can apply for a SAFER grant consecutive year,
Every-
every fourth year, but you can't have two at the same time. So the thing I want to make sure that everybody understands, if there's any consideration to move with the SAFER grant, if it's not something meaningful, it might be better off to try to move forward without the SAFER grant if you think there's a rational reason that you might move forward with another hiring initiative next year or even the year after that's much larger. Because if you get into let's say we move forward with 4 8 firefighters this year, and we exercise a SAFER grant for that and we're awarded, and then all of a sudden next year the system continued to produce a further need that really put us in a situation that we had to absolutely do something, you can't exercise the SAFER grant for that because you're already committed until it's out. So those are the things you want to think through if we do anything. What seems to be the best path forward, which is a SAFER grant, might not be if we're not in a position to go strong enough this year, but we believe there's a high likelihood in years 2 or 3 we have to hire a much larger number of staff. So, and that's really what we
It
put
might
forward.
take us a year to get 32 firefighters. Would you agree? I mean, to implement it 32 in?
Yeah, so if we were, let's say the award notification came in June, we probably wouldn't get the first group on board till October, and we'd have to have the next group on board prior to January 1st, because the grant would expire and we wouldn't be qualified to hire beyond that.
Is there a penalty if we apply for 32 and after that 6-month time frame, we've only hired 25?
No.
So we're not going to be penalized for that?
No penalty, you just don't get the additional funding. So if
we
we
stop
apply
at
for
25.
32, we can only get 18. 18 is what the grant applies for.
In the next 3 years?
Yeah, 3 years. And you can see, we tried to give as much visual representation of what that scenario might look like at the bottom of the sheet. And, we've talked about things, and I hate to bring the reserve fleet back to the table, but I understand I get to look at a lot of things that you get to look at, and some people behind me may not. And I think Sarah would tell you that I'm fairly understanding when we have to come back to the table. So I'm here saying that at years 2 and 3, we can put that there. If the commissioners want to commit to that and the money's not there, and the CFO and I and the county administrator had this conversation just yesterday, it may be that we have to give up the $800,000 even year 1. So again, I don't want you to make a commitment that you're not comfortable with without understanding that this thing balloons. And even though we get,
But then again, you could apply for 32, and if we got hired 20, we'd only be charged for 20.
That's right.
We'd carry 20, and the excess money would not ever be funded.
that's right.
Okay, gotcha.
Limitations on that application, say we only have 15, could we, the second year, apply for
No.
another, you have a 3-year
Yep.
window?
Yeah. Yeah, you can't have
that
2
first year.
working SAFER grants at the same time for staffing. Now, you could have a recruitment and retention grant going at the same time you had a staffing grant, but you can't have 2 staffing grants going at the same time.
Now, real quick question on this. The EMS operations right now is approximately $1.5 million. On this other thing for the 108 EMS, is that an additional 2.4 above what's currently on there, or is that all totaled?
That's additional.
Okay, so then the EMS operation would go from 1.5 to 3.9.
And where are you pulling the 1.5 from?
Uh-oh.
Off our budget?
Yeah, it
Yes,
says
that's correct. That is correct. Yep.
A couple things have been brought up that with this funding, I think the earlier gentleman said, you have to open their books, because this is one thing I know that I think every commissioner here we've talked about, is that this is a large ask, and we all agree, or at least I'll speak for myself, agree that this needs to be done, but at the same time there needs to be accountability with all of the departments for this, because we know that there's things that happen. And you talked about a single billing system. I think that's something that would definitely have to happen so that we make sure we're recovering as much as possible. And I also believe I don't think we discussed this today, but I know we've talked about this before. You did an excellent job with the insurance, and that's saving, I think it was over $200,000 for the for the county, which is amazing. I think we also need to look at the same things like with workers' compensation. That's something that if we brought that under and we're able to, get the benefits of a large group, I think we could save, even if it's $50,000 to $100,000. All that money can go back into this and help us get this covered. So I think that's something that we should be looking at also. Instead of just the single billing, I think we should be looking at workers' compensation.
Now, are you talking about workers' comp for the individual corporation employees or the volunteers?
Yes.
We're specific. Yes and yes?
Yes. So
Okay. I mean, if we brought the EMS group over underneath us, that would come, and whatever happens there would happen, yeah. And that 2.5 is driven off of numbers that Sarah and I have shared using the benefits calculator that we need to use for emergency service, because it is higher than the general calculation for normal county workers.
Okay.
And a comment, I agree that we would want to review the financial practices. It's not to look for crime or misdoing. It's a way to look at your business practice to best utilize the money, correct? Just like with the insurance thing. So I want everybody to know that's not what our goal is. Our goal is to find the best business practices and manage that money.
My hopes would be able to sit here before you. You ask me a question and me answer affirmative when it's about how a taxpayer dollar is spent. And that, again, I'm with the president on this. It's not to try to take your autonomy away or anything like that, but we're the stewards. We're the messengers, so to speak, between the two, and that's our job to try to make sure that taxpayer money is being spent. And when we're asking the taxpayer to potentially foot a bill here that's in total probably in the millions of dollars, we have to make sure we're taking care of our house.
Dave, don't you have ongoing conversations with staff about some checks and balances, some better housekeeping and financially and full disclosures? Aren't we talking about that, Rob?
We are. One came up this weekend actually about fuel and sales tax that may not be applicable after request or rebate for fuel tax. So there are a number of those items. Separate from that question, if I may, is that we do have a considerable amount of request, and as it states in the concurrence, I do fully support it. We also must be realistic in the numbers that we have to find the way to pay for that support. Now, the fire side, we can see the 625 is reasonably, there are means to do that. The EMS side is 2.5. There's not quite the breakdown on that, so I don't know what staging you're looking at as far as that goes.
And that's where we really need some direction, I think, from the board to be able to decide how to break that out. So the fire side's a little easier, and if we decided to bring a number of companies on board one year and then some another, the employee factor doesn't come into that, meaning existing employees. But each of these companies have current full-time employees that have varying degrees of time with those companies. So one of the things our concern was to have a conversation like that prior to tonight was if we were going to bring company X and Y on year one and then company A and B on year two, this group of employees potentially get a reward that another group might not get, meaning moving into the county pension plan and all those things and seniority and the things that come along. So I'm not sure if I'm answering exactly what you're looking at, but that's kind of the
I think what I was thinking, Dave, is you can see the 625 in the SAFER grant, because with the SAFER grant, which doesn't apply to EMS, unfortunately, you can see that broken down and it's more digestible that first 2 years. And that's probably the whole point to a SAFER grant, is it gives you the opportunity to begin funding
grow
for
into
that.
it. Yeah.
The percentages, I don't know if you have those off the top of your head for SAFER, the year 1, year 2, and year 3.
Yeah, so it's 25%. Well, I'm sorry. You get a 75% coverage for year 1 and 2. Then it's a 35% coverage year 3 and year 4. It's all 100% on the county or the jurisdiction that's receiving the grant. Yeah.
Year 5.
Year 4. So it's really a 3-year program. The 4th year it expires, and you have to be prepared to absorb, the full cost. And you summed it up, Rob, I think, as well as probably anybody yet. It's really meant to buffer the walk into the park, so to speak. But there has to be an understanding that, when you're in the park, there's a cost to being in the park, and that park sooner or later becomes yours. The bad part is on the EMS side, we don't have any of those buffers other than to pull back the staffing subsidy and then a measurable portion of the billing revenue.
Right. But through many, many discussions we've had, the fire and the EMS can't be separated. They're both
Correct.
equally important.
Yep.
And we can't forget about one without the other.
Yep.
So currently I apologize.
No, it's okay.
Currently we have 8 EMS staff that work at all of our units, correct? The eight EMS staff, they can work at any one of our units. They work mainly out of the,
So Clear Spring Fire Station and the Roarsville Fire Station are their locations, and they run a chase car, an ALS chase car, with advanced skills, so to speak. But go ahead, I'll let you finish there real quick.
but we have other companies have their own paid staff. And then we're talking about taking those companies that already have paid staff, bringing them on, and then adding additional staffing.
Right, to balance out the number we need to fulfill all the stations. There's some stations, again, that a provider might work at Station A and then also work at Station C. So one person is filling up either 2 complete positions or 1.5 positions.
We can't do that.
Yeah, I think I know where Rob's talking to as well, and I want to come back into that as well. So when we talk about these 2 approaches, really, I agree, we can't just take on the fire and not do anything on the EMS side. So it's very possible we have to bring this thing down to smaller numbers, even on each side, to be able to do something to begin the journey. And I know that's not what some of us might want to hear, but it may be the reality of where we have to be until we can walk in this park and figure out how we're going to live in it, because it's going to grow. Even this particular approach it's not the sustainable solution. It's going to eventually take, again, more volunteer incentives, and they may be some measurable dollars too. And then the cost of providing the service, the apparatus and equipment, because I just talked about giving up the reserve fleet and those future funding years for that. That all now comes back to the volunteers again as well. So the financial picture of this thing is measurable, and it's something that is not going to be easy to cover. But how we go into the EMS side of that thing, I don't think is an easy walk, Rob. But it's definitely, I understand where you're going with that conversation, though.
Yeah, unfortunately, SAFER isn't there on EMS to buffer it, and unfortunately, we had the discussion with the Board of Ed who has funding requirements, so we're in a very challenging fiscal year budget-wise coming up in FY 2020. That doesn't mean that this isn't required or necessary. It simply means it's very challenging. So it will take time, and maybe these are already broken down in phases, so I want to be careful not to use phases, but maybe there's stages of the phases that it has to be absorbed in.
And I think that's what we probably need here tonight is, we know there's potentially an $800,000 nugget there that we can try to tackle, and if that 800 is it, then we're going to try to break this thing down and say, okay, here's where X dollars go and X dollars go, and I'm talking geographically where they go as well, and have that conversation to move forward. And my conversation about the SAFER grant earlier was really, again, if this year isn't the year that we can do a measurable contribution financially, but you believe next year or the year after is, we may want to hold the SAFER grant for those years. Now, if you think that that's not possible, then let's exercise the SAFER grant and do what we can do.
I've got another question on the EMS, and sorry I keep going back to it. But so on the EMS, so I understand this correctly, I think it was 108
Yes.
full-time. So that 108 is including currently what's already being paid through the departments, through their individual companies, and additional revenue. So how many EMS are currently employed through the different departments, not through the county?
So total numbers of people, I don't know that I can answer that because that's owned and controlled by 8 different agencies. But what I can tell you is currently in today's world, we staff 12 or 13 transport units. And if you look at staffing that 24 hours a day, that takes, depending on which department you're at, because they all work different shifts, that could take anywhere from 3 people, 3.5 people per department, or 4 people per department to staff that 24 hours a day. So remember we talked about it takes 4 people to put 1 person 24 hours a day. On an ambulance, it takes 8 people because we have to have an EMT and a paramedic, or at least 2 EMTs. It can't go driver only and do its job. So the numbers you see in the EMS world are twice what they are in the fire department per station. So that's where you get to 8 people per station to staff that.
I guess the reason why I was trying to figure out is I know we have the 8 people that are on the chase cars. Is, you know, what additional amount if we did something similar to what we're doing with the fire department, is where we had a group of EMS that worked at multiple different units that could supplement them without having to go to the full 108 at this point. That's what I guess I was trying to get to a number. What number would we be able to have to staff these 8 different companies at a sufficient level without fully taking over everything?
So just to bring this back to something we can run our head pretty quick, if you take 7 departments that only have 1 ambulance staffed, we need 28 people times 2 is 56 to staff those 7 departments. That doesn't count the half unit for halfway. Community Rescue Service is the force multiplier. They have 5 staff transport units, so you need an additional 40 there to staff that. And I'm not sure I'm going where you're trying to go, but I'm trying to bring the math forward the way I think I understand the question.
I'm trying to figure out what they currently have. What do we need to supplement them so that they're being staffed properly?
So something similar to what we're doing currently on the fire side.
Correct.
Well, let me jump in and offer what does happen now, and you probably know this, but by the question, I'm not sure. Currently, we have 8 full-time firefighters that come in and supplement, and 23 part-time, correct?
Yeah, but the 8 full-time work primarily at special operations.
Yeah.
But yeah,
We also on the that's on the fire side.
correct.
And on the EMS side, we have 8 full-time paramedics that supplement each of the companies, and you said they're in 2 different locations.
Correct.
So that's what we have today. We have 8 and 8 full-time.
And-
You're asking what would it take to increase that supplement to each of the
Just on the
to
EMS
companies?
side.
Just on the EMS.
So not fully incorporating all the units and the 108, and then getting up to 108 total employees. But what would it take to supplement that EMS? Because that 2.5 million nugget is a hard nugget to grab on, day one. And so what I'm trying to figure out is what
The phasing or staging.
staging of the phasing we can get to.
Right. I don't know that I have that available here tonight. We didn't break it down to that degree, but you got something to add, Bob?
We're not too bad on manpower right now on the EMS side. Where we're hurting at is the financials are not coming in. Somehow the billing isn't working out as well as it should. And of course, 80% of our calls are the EMS side of the business, so we've got to make sure we shore that one up. We're probably only short a few people in some stations to make this thing work, but it's one of those things if we take the people into the county, we've got to take them all at one time, because if not, you got conflicts and pay variations and everything else. And of course, we're always fighting the pay scale to keep people from going down the road, and that hurts too.
So the other thing that could potentially happen in that scenario is, let's say it was 8, and we hire 8 people. They're probably coming from the departments that we're trying to help. So we potentially exacerbate a problem that's already there, which is a recruitment and retention issue that they're not able to bring on board because we come on board as a county agency and do that. But if that's where we're going with that question, I think I would probably tell you if we had if we were going to use them in a similar capacity that we're using our part-time firefighters, and we were to hire full-time staff so that we had them at our disposal to do so, we probably would need about 8, and that really is just a swag, because that's not the question we've been asked by the departments. They didn't provide us with, I need staffing on Tuesdays and Fridays, but I don't need it on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So that would take a further look. But the one thing we do have with EMS, potentially, if that's something you wanted us to explore further, is a little time. We're not married into the March 22nd deadline for that one. Now, we're obviously in budget, so that's challenging. But so I don't really know a better answer than that for tonight.
Dave, if I could ask a question or two. First of all, thanks for all the time. I'm sure there's years' worth of information here
Sure.
that we're looking at. Referring to the 2 sheets that, I guess they're the 2 different scenarios similar to this.
The firefighters?
Yes,
Yeah.
for firefighters. It looks like the battalion chiefs, 2 is the recommendation. Is that the only layers of management we would need with this plan? And are the battalion chiefs, are their salaries covered under the SAFER grant? And then I have a follow-up to that.
Yeah, so that is the layer of management we recommend to put in, and that goes back into the original writing of the 5 phases and where we thought. And you'll see later in those phases, we actually move them to 24-hour supervisors as we get up closer to 100 firefighters that are working, not at any one time. But again, with all those things are the management issues that come and scheduling, but they're covered, in our presentation here. And the other thing I want to make sure is, this is really going to be 1 battalion chief each day, just a dayside block. To get 7 days, we're going to have 2 of them. So it's just 2 positions that we're recommending total.
And then the follow-up to that, I read the surveys of our individual companies, and just from speaking at different meetings or events with members of the fire and rescue community here, there seems to be maybe I wouldn't call it a concern, just a need for more understanding of what level of authority would the individual companies, what might they have management-wise over the employees that we're sending into their companies? What kind of autonomy would they have?
Right.
Oversight.
So we're currently working a similar program right now with the part-time staff. They work in the station. Employment and employer-employee relationships are managed through the county, and they have to be. That's where the law falls. But the operational policies, as long as they're standardized, fall to the local department. And again, I think you'd find in most jurisdictions, the battalion chiefs would be their direct supervisor daily, but they're not going to be in each station. So there's going to be an expectation that within the station, there's a hierarchy there that falls in line with that as well.
I think, Commissioner Kiefer, I think your question touches upon one of the most difficult things with this hybrid system that we've talked about, is everybody wants to know who's responsible for what, and this does introduce that question, and it would certainly have to be addressed to be very clear. And it is the company that runs the station now, so one may offer that should be taken very seriously, that company, if a staff member is going into there, then that is the company, that is the ownership by the company. Right. And they have to fit within the company, certainly.
And that's one of the operational policies that we have in place right now. When we move the 23 firefighters out there, we developed a policy to drive that as well.
I would assume that would come through a great deal of dialogue between you, Jonathan, Dave, and the leadership that's out in each company.
Yeah, the way we run that is through the Chiefs Committee, which is normally the operational group of the Volunteer Fire and Rescue Association that represents each of the 26 departments. Yeah.
Dave, I know one of the questions with the battalion chiefs is if you go in a staged approach, they wouldn't be necessary, and that's certainly not the most important part immediately. Is that correct?
Correct. That is correct. Yeah. If we go to any real measure that's measurably smaller than what we're proposing, then we would push those battalion chiefs out to some degree. Because again, the last thing I want to do is unintentionally take boots off the street. But there'll be a number where we're going to have to say we can't manage this volume of staff from Elliott Parkway Monday through Friday, that we'll have to have people out there, because I don't want to put people in fire stations and then not be able to address concerns of either party, the employee or the volunteer leadership, in a timely manner. And it's going to be difficult to do that all hours of every day, 365 days a year. But again, in the infant stages, I would agree we wouldn't have to have them.
When does the SAFER grant have to be in?
Deadline for submissions, March 22nd.
22nd.
And how long would, if we would vote or not vote or whatever we do here, how long would it take for you to process to make that deadline? How much lead time do you want from us?
So we're moving forward and have been for better than a month, not under an assumption that we would get permission, but under the promise that if we were given permission, we would not be the reason we wouldn't make it. So we will not.
So if we gave you an answer next meeting, you'd have plenty of time.
Yeah.
We wouldn't, what we don't want to happen is miss a deadline.
Yeah, right, correct.
So-
So in a nutshell, we're going to continue moving forward till you tell us no. Because all the work, whether it's 2 firefighters or 200, is very similar. The only thing we change is the number of people and the cost. But the demographics, the background information, we have to have it all. So we're marching forward on that right now. We're fully engaged in preparing for the SAFER grant today.
There's no doubt that you need personnel. There's no one will ever argue that.
Right.
I think it would be, the commissioners would probably, I heard what you said, you could put in for 32 and hire 20. Court and I were just talking, and we thought maybe, when the commissioners agree, they might just say 25 or 20. The biggest fear is the end of that 3 years, we don't know what our fiscal condition will be.
I get it. Yeah, I understand. I'm with
And we just don't want to, dig ourselves a hole here, but we definitely got to do something.
Yeah, and
we know
our
that.
challenge, and our challenge is to look at it and decide how much is enough that it's meaningful, and how much is just kind of taking a swing at it, but not really affecting a difference. And that's the challenge. I mean, we all know this all comes down to the financial ability to pay for it. That's the simple conversation here.
And if we went full steam ahead, it would take, if we just did everything complete the phase 2 in 2 steps, 2 stages, it would take 6 years or 8 years, whatever, right? Correct.
Well, a
Yeah.
little over 3.
No, if we did it in steps like 32 and then another 30, we get 60 or something like
Yeah,
that?
you'd get to 60 in your 4th year, because
gotcha.
you'd apply in your 4th year again and actionize that, if you awarded it, would actionize. And again, so I want to make sure this is clear tonight too. There's a lot of assumption that we would have a successful award here. So anything we're charged with, just please understand, there's always a chance we get denied. So,
Understand.
which, would be terrible.
You're pretty confident, though. You're pretty confident that, I won't put you in that spot.
Yeah, I mean,
It's 70-30 maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I would think if I was a betting man, I'd bet on this grant. But, again, I'm not on the committee. I don't know people on the committee, so I just have to go off of what we look at historically that has been funded and compare our county to that. And we are absolutely a startup. And everything I know about this grant, we're the counties it's made for.
Thank you.
I'm definitely in support of the SAFER grant. I do have to figure out the numbers on that and talk to other people in the community, what we're looking at, but it's something I think we need to be looking at. But at the same time, I'd like you guys to continue the discussion of bringing up the single billing facility, because that, we need to be able to recover as much as we can on this. And so I want to, kind of push on that a little bit. And if there's a way we can work with the workers' compensation, bringing all the volunteers under one thing to save us a little bit more money, and make this number a little bit more palatable, every penny counts right now. So, but thank you.
Okay.
So Dave,
Yes, sir.
say we go for the SAFER grant and talk to staff, and they said we can comfortably afford 12 firefighters moving forward for the next 3 years. how do you determine which company gets those firefighters?
So I think those are dialogues that we would have to have with the Chiefs Committee as well. We've played scenarios, being honest, we've played scenarios out in our office till we're blue, trying to figure if this, then what would we do? And, one of the conversations we talked about is simply to use a quarterly spreadsheet. The company that struggled the hardest, if it's one company, that's the first company, and just try to, to me, there's no clear answer to that here tonight, but I think that comes with dialogue again from the chiefs, and hopefully we can come to consensus that, we can't do everything today, so here's what we can do, where is it best utilized? And we'd certainly go into those conversations, what we
And
believe.
once we move forward, and if we do meet the potential full staffing, how do we compensate the companies that don't want the staffing? Because I would think that they would deserve something also.
Yeah, and all that's yet to be decided because really we don't have a financial number to even begin to work with. So, and that's been our challenge, I think, up until this point in preparing what we believe is a plausible presentation. What we've brought here tonight is what we've been asked to bring here, and it really was hard to break it down before that because we would take some presumptions on their behalf that I don't think is fair to take without having some input from the commissioners. And, I recognize that you're the group that has to tell us exactly where we can drive this thing to. And again, if we get to something, Commissioner, to where it's 12 and you say, we want part of this money to go to the EMS, which again, I advocate we do that. We need to try to work on that EMS problem at the same time. Then we're going to split this up, come back with X here and X here on fire and EMS, and then you'll have a defined path forward that we think you'll probably be willing to accept.
Dave, I think all the commissioners agree, if not, just yell at me or something. I am still really big. I'm in, to do things as much as we possibly fiscally, we can. But I would like everybody to be accountable and full disclosure on their finances. I know there's been some issues here and there. We know that, but I think that's something I really want to be working on because I don't mind helping with money for sure. But does any of the commissioners have any thoughts on that or?
Yeah, like I said, this is not to look for wrongdoing, it's to better
Right.
business practices.
And those are conversations I think that I would encourage that we have with our CFO and her staff and county administration staff,
right,
to make sure that whatever we propose is something that's manageable, either with current staff or it might even take another staff person. I don't know. I'd hope not, but I'm just throwing these things out. But I agree with you, and I think I believe the group behind me is open to all those conversations because I don't know that anybody isn't trying to do the right thing, and most of them.
No, we don't think so, but it's just housekeeping.
No, I agree. We need to be able to, when somebody asks us a question, we should be able to open up a book or some form or some review and say, here's the answer. And we can't really do that right now. And I know a lot of the reports come through Sarah's office, but it's a fairly generic form. It doesn't really break it down into really an itemized breakout of charges and expenses.
Well, let me ask in a bit different terms. The $200,000 saved on insurance would buy approximately 4 additional firefighters or EMS, correct?
A little short, but close.
Round numbers,
yeah.
Say 3.
Yep.
Say fuel tax may, if we could save that, which just came up recently.
Right.
That may save 50,000. I'm throwing a number out there, but that may support 1 additional personnel. The point is, everything we can do for consistency across the board, every dollar we can save, that's more personnel we can get out and actually pay for. That's more service, more equipment, and so forth. So there's some standard accounting that could be done to really help everyone out. And at the taxpayer dollar, our grant management office tells me we have to monitor every dollar that goes out through their office. So I know when $7 million is in play, it's certainly something that we need to be safe about.
Yep.
And if we can save money and be safe at the same time, that's even better.
Yeah.
Because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, all commissioners, the interest is in any savings gets reinvested back into the program. And that, yeah, so.
Commissioners, any other questions for the panel?
If it's all right, and apologies, could we, have them be able to come back next week, and so we have time to look over this and figure out a funding?
Next week or so would be fine.
Because I know we have a meeting next week, and then it looks like we're off for a week, and I don't want to be in the predicament of giving them, the next meeting would be March 19th, and they're due the 22nd. I don't want to be in the predicament of giving them 2 days to do it, so it really comes down to next week.
I'm okay with that, gentlemen.
Is it possible to maybe provide a consensus? I lean towards the SAFER grant. You said it's just basically the difference would be changing numbers around, 12 versus 20 versus 30.
It's a little bit of work, but yeah.
Could we give you maybe direction to start the process? Maybe you already
So
are
we're
well
doing it. You don't
underway.
have to give us
You're just
anything else
waiting
with
on a
that.
number from us.
Yeah,
I think that's what
we've got
board is waiting
we've
to
got a
decide
staff on
on.
light duty that's working full-time, putting this package together. So it really will be, if you give us a week or better, it's just inputting into the electronic submission side of the program and making sure we're right.
I think it's just about a number right now, I think.
That's
at
my
least for a
read.
couple of us.
If I could be,
Yeah.
if I could be honest, that's my read. Yeah.
Yeah, to make the best use of everyone's time here, really, and Sarah can cut me off if I'm wrong on the numbers, is what we have is the fleet reserve right now. Until we have additional revenue that we find, that's what we have. Is there more? Is there somewhere? In fact, we're looking for more to make our budget whole right now.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's what we have. I think we have to have discussion with the folks involved here that play a big part in this to determine if it's broken down, how can it be broken down to that if there's no additional money beyond that.
And I think what I'd add to that, and this is a discussion I had with the administrator yesterday, is for us to strategically plan how to implement $800,000 to its best effect, not just this year, but in future years, we have to know, is the 800 meant to be the funding mechanism even through year 4 when we take the whole thing back? If you follow what I'm saying by that, means that there is no more than 800,000, or is it the commissioner's intent to say max the 800,000, understand year 3, somehow, some way, you're going to have to generate at least this much more money for this particular program that we're already committed to. In year 4, it has to be this much for this particular program that we're already committed for. So that's the question, I think, that is in part we need to know, and I don't know that needs answered here tonight either, but we'll need that information because we can't design anything in a staged approach unless we know if 800 is here to 4 or 5 years, or if 800 is just the first part of EMS and fire, the fire side being the SAFER grant, but then knowing that years 3 and 4 on the fire side, the SAFER grant's going away. EMS is going to stay, but really, if we don't bring the whole EMS thing, even years 2, 3, 4, and 5, or whatever period, that would escalate. So that's really, I think, what I would tell you as your representative is the direction I need almost as much as how many you want us to try to hire, is what you're willing to support from years 3 on out, or even years 2 on out, as that grant goes away. And again, knowing that for the EMS side, we're probably not going to do it all at one time, which we all agree that 2.5 nut is big, but do you want us to, year 2, are you willing to try to find another $800,000? In year 3, another $800,000. In year 4, another $800,000 above the original 800 we can give up. And we don't have any more stuff to give up. That's the last well I've got. And I think she's over there shaking her head, and that's a hard one to give up. But again, it's about priorities.
Yeah, this is going to be a process. It's going to take a while.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen like next year.
Yep.
Hey, gentlemen, any more questions for the panel?
I think Mr. Hopkins had something he wanted to add.
I'm Dick Hopkins. I also serve on the Emergency Services Advisory Council. And, in looking at some of the responses, there's not only failed responses, but where we don't have enough people. A driver-only response, or even one person with that driver, is not really going to be adequate on the scene of a significant fire. there are, regulations that we do have to comply with. The OSHA 1910 134 respirator standard talks about if you're going to send personnel into an IDLH environment, which is immediately dangerous to life and health, which a structure fire indicates that, unless there is a rescue, imminent rescue, that you know that there's somebody trapped in there, not like a car in the driveway or something like that, but somebody knows that they are trapped in there, that is the only time that you can go without complying with the 2 in, 2 out. That talks about if you're going to send a team in, you have to have a team outside ready to rescue those people that go in there. And with fire situations, many times the firefighter fatalities occur within the initial phase of an incident. So that's something that we need to consider with the adequate staffing as well.
Mr. Poole, would you like to add anything?
No, I think he summed it up, excuse me, very well. I want to just mention, if I might, go back to the SAFER grant, and it's been brought up by a couple commissioners tonight and by Mr. Slocum, but we want to remember that after the 3rd year, we've got to pay for the people. And I know you've mentioned it, but I think 2 weeks ago we were here and we talked about it, and it's really important. But what Dick said is absolutely correct. We could have serious liability issues if somebody doesn't comply with the OSHA reg.
Yeah. And what people don't see is when a piece of apparatus goes down the road, how many are on there. Because now with the National Fire Protection Association standards, they all have to be in an enclosed cab. So if you see a rig going down the street, you don't know if there's 1 on there or 4. So the public doesn't realize how critical the staffing issue is in the county. And it's not only, as Dave pointed out, not only here, but it's across the state and as well as across the country.
Any other questions?
No, good.
I got one comment.
Yes, sir.
We've also got a lot of part-time firefighters. They're kind of helping us. They might work in Loudoun County or someplace else and live here. So we got to make sure we don't treat them badly, because they are keeping us alive, and they're that foundation of a lot of things that, happen. So they're being paid now, and we've got to make sure we don't treat them badly or throw them out, because they was helping us in the in-between time before we can get the staffing to lots of people in every station. We just have to think about that as we go, not to discard them or treat them badly.
Well, another thing also with the part-time staffing, as Bob pointed out, they are career firefighters at other locations, and some of them are within the city of Hagerstown. And if you had a major incident that occurred within this community, those people are going to have to go back to their full-time job if they're called in. So you may lose those part-time people, correct, Dave? So that's something to consider. The part-time people are a Band-Aid that we've been using, and not to shove them out, but that's something to consider.
All right, commissioners, any other comments?
I'm good.
Thank you very much.
Thank
for
you
your
very
time.
much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone in attendance tonight as well. Thank you. Next agenda item, Leslie Hart, proclamation, Future Farmers of America. So you're going to do them all at one time to one person?
You're just gonna read one.
Went to.
Okay. Oh, here they come in.
Yeah.
Let her speak.
You don't do
Yeah, did you hear, did they say anything about clicking?
It's working now. It was earlier.
You sure it wasn't this? Wasn't this, was it?
No, it was this.
Yeah, I wanted to see,
We're gonna read one and then give them out as a whole. Yes, ma'am. Perfect. Thanks.
So, the
Some of
simple,
them want it because they're full-time somewhere else.
exactly.
I know
So
that, but-
probably the vast majority are all full-time somewhere else.
Okay.
It's become a
Leslie, you'll do the introduction.
becomes a career, and make a really good salary at it.
All right, Leslie, if you want to go ahead and get started, the room's clearing. Take your time.
Probably all of them.
Shush 'em out.
Commissioners, thank you very much for having us here this evening.
A little quiet in the gallery, please, for
I
Leslie.
wanted to take
Thank
a
you.
minute and just tell you how blessed I am to work with these young individuals that you see standing to my right. These are representatives from all the chapters within Washington County, the Future Farmers of America, FFA, as most of you know. They stand out everywhere they go because of their formal dress, which is the blue jacket, black pants, and they always are very near and dear to my heart. I just want to very quickly introduce, I have Mr. Rourke, who is the teacher from Smithsburg, and Lindsay Augenball and Aaron Rolls here from Smithsburg. I have from Boonesboro, Miss Quinn Cashel-Martin, Dane Grossnickel, and Kayla Stauffer, who's a student teacher. I have Helen Lettingham here with me. She's going to talk to you in just a minute. Olivia DeBall, who's our vice president. We didn't have any representation from Hancock, but they are doing very well since Mr. Mazzoni left Hancock and has moved to Clear Spring. And then we have Clear Spring. We have Katie Toms, who's the secretary, Cale Hickson, who's the vice president, and Tanner Harshman, who's the reporter. I couldn't really figure out what I wanted to say or anything, so I am going to ask Miss Helen to read you the creed for FFA, which I think represents everything about these kids. Go ahead.
The FFA Creed by E.M. Tiffany. I believe in the future of agriculture, with a faith born not of words but of deeds, achievements won by the present and past generations of agriculturalists, and the promise of better days through better ways, even as the better things we now enjoy have come to us from the struggles of former years. I believe that to live and work on a good farm, or to be engaged in other agricultural pursuits, is pleasant as well as challenging, for I know the joys and discomforts of agricultural life, and hold an inborn fondness for those associations, which even in hours of discouragement I cannot deny. I believe in leadership from ourselves and respect from others. I believe in my own ability to work efficiently and think clearly with such knowledge and skill as I can secure, and in the ability of progressive agriculturalists to serve our own in the public interest in producing and marketing the product of our toil. I believe in less dependence on begging and more power in bargaining, in a life abundant and enough honest wealth to help make it so, for others as well as myself, and less need for charity and more of it when needed, in being happy myself and playing square with those whose happiness depends upon me. I believe that American agriculture can and will hold true to the best traditions of our national life, and that I can exert an influence in my home and community, which will stand solid for my part in that inspiring task. Thank you.
Woo-hoo! Jeff, you want to do the proclamation? God, that gets me every time. I just love these kids. We're going to do just one photograph, and you do the proclamation, and then we'll go outside.
Then I'd like to get the commissioners in a group picture.
That would be awesome. Come on, gang.
We'll do after the proclamation, then we'll go down here.
All right.
I was waiting for Hancock to check, 'cause 5 years ago this week, they had their initiation of their charter, and I had all kinds of embarrassing pictures. Tell Hancock they were missing. What I'd like to do then is present these proclamations all at once, and Leslie will distribute them. On behalf of the Board of County Commissioners of Washington County, Maryland, we'd like to present this proclamation for National Future Farmers of America Week, February 16th to the 23rd, 2019. Whereas Future Farmers of America and agricultural education provide a strong foundation for the youth of America and the future of the food, fiber, and natural resource systems. And whereas Future Farmers of America promotes premier leadership, personal growth, and career success, thank you very much, among its members. And whereas agriculture education and Future Farmers of America ensure a steady supply of young professionals to meet the growing needs in science, business, technology, of agriculture. Very good. Hey, I know farmers that have PhDs, master degrees. Whereas the Future Farmers of America Lotto, learning to do, doing to learn, earning to live, living to serve, gives directions and purpose to those students who take an active role in succeeding in agriculture education. And whereas Future Farmers of America promotes citizenship, volunteerism, patriotism, and cooperation. Now, therefore, we, the Board of County Commissioners of Washington County, Maryland, do hereby recognize this week of February 16th through the 23rd, 2019, as National Future Farmers of America Week, signed by all the members of the Board of Commissioners. Congratulations. Thanks for all that you do. I'd like to
Them pictures.
1, 2, 3. One more. Perfect.
Oh, thank you, Jeff. I'm going to switch.
Good, how are you?
Yep. Squeeze in, squeeze in. Very, very nice.
All right, ready? 1, 2, 3.
Oh, we got Terry. We need Terry. Sorry, Terry. Come in there. Come in there.
Yep.
There we go. Excellent.
Ready? 1,
Big smiles.
2, 3. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
How are you? Nice to see you.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Back here getting pizza.
Yeah.
Getting birthday cake. It's Wayne's birthday, Jeff.
We all forgot to sing happy birthday to Commissioner Kiefer today.
You want to start it?
He's
Where's he at? Where'd he go?
Wayne's organized. We'll be right with you, folks. Momentary pause.
Birthday boy.
Next on our agenda, we'd like to have a presentation of the proclamation announcing February 2019 as Black History Month, and I'm going to turn that over to Commissioner Kiefer, who is on the Diversity Committee. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. I think what we'll do, we have members of our diversity committee here to receive our proclamation. And if you would like to have a seat at the front table and share any words that you might like to share. And then we'll go over to the flags and read the proclamation.
Thank you very much.
First of all, I want to thank you for this day, this proclamation. It extends beyond just Washington County. It embraces everyone, those who travel from parts far away to come to Washington County. It says welcome. It says we recognize your needs and your desires, and we're here to provide those. So I just want to thank you. It is a pleasure to serve on the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, and I am just eminently pleased and grateful for what has happened and is happening in this county.
Thank you for them very kind words. Anyone else would like to speak at the?
I just want to thank you for the opportunity of this committee that is going to be serving so many needs of different groups in our community. And I am very pleased to just be part, I'm very honored to just be part of the Washington County Diverse Committee and Inclusion People. And this is a representation of what we are here in Washington County, different languages, different ethnic backgrounds, and I really appreciate that the commissioners has opened this opportunity for all of us to just serve Washington County here.
Thank you for those words. Anyone else?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity, and I'm glad to be part of the Diversity Inclusion Committee, and thank you for honoring Black History Month. It's just an honor and a pleasure to serve. Thank you.
Sure. Wayne, would you like to do the presentation?
Okay, proclamation, Black History Month, February 2019. Whereas since President Gerald Ford established Black History Month in 1976, he stated that it was to celebrate the often neglected accomplishments of African Americans throughout the country's history. And whereas February was specifically chosen for various reasons, one being that Carter Goodwin Woodson wanted to pay tribute to two great men, Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass, both born in the month of February. And whereas these men changed the fortune of blacks in America and brought about several reforms to give blacks equal status as their white counterparts, and whereas the story of African American experience in Maryland includes the life and accomplishments of Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman's Underground Railroad, and Thurgood Marshall, the first black Supreme Court justice, one of the century's foremost leaders in the struggle for equal rights. Now, therefore, we, the Board of County Commissioners of Washington County, hereby recognize the month of February as Black History Month. With this recognition, we celebrate the many achievements and contributions made by African Americans to our economic, cultural, spiritual, and political development. Signed by all 5 county commissioners this 26th day of February. Thank you very much. How are you, Carlos?
I do not. I'll probably get them. All right, are we ready? 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Commissioner Kiefer, everyone that planned those 2 proclamations, thank you very much. It went very well. Next on our agenda is Chief Financial Officer Sarah Greaves. with the presentation of the 2029 capital budget draft 1, part 2.
Good evening, Commissioners. Sarah Greaves, Chief Financial Officer. I have with me Kelsey Mace, Deputy Director of Budget and Finance, and Misty Rosenberry, Accountant in Budget and Finance. The good news is you've heard the majority of this presentation on the 12th, so we're going to just pick up where we've left off, which would be tab 15 in your capital budget books, and we'll be starting on public safety. Okay. So the 10-year plan for public safety. Somebody say something?
Okay.
No? Okay. You've got them squared away, Krista?
Go for it.
Okay. 10-year plan for public safety is $27.1 million, of which $3.6 million is for FY 2020. Major changes to the plan include the Police, Fire, and Emergency Services Training Center being consolidated into fewer years for a more realistic construction period. In the last plan, we had the funding spread out until 2026, so that just means consolidating that, trying to finish up the funding in that plan by 2023. We will continue to work towards funding this project in a more expeditious manner, especially if state funding is secured for the project. Total project cost is $11.5 million, and that did not change from the previous plan. And it is expected at this point that both bonds and revenue from speed cameras will provide funding for this project. Detention center systemic improvements did have a request of an increased cost to $610,000 for FY 2020. This is up from a previous year's allocated amount of $260,000. Unfortunately, due to funding constraints, this request could not be proposed by the CIP committee in total. However, $380,000 of that request was for the Sheriff's Office Fuel Center replacement, which did create its own project.
Can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
Hate to interrupt, but I don't understand, why do we have a fuel center replacement at the Sheriff's Detention Center? Why is that?
Randy, I think, can speak to that.
I don't know specifically how to address that question.
Well, it exists now and it operates, correct?
Yes, there's probably 100, 125 vehicles that fuel there on any given day, maybe 25, 30. I've been to the sheriff's office a long time. We've always had our own fuel there. I know we benefit tax-wise by having our own. It would be inconvenient to move to another location to fuel. I don't know how to answer you other than that, Commissioner.
Well, it's the line item is fuel center replacement. I think I know where it's located now. It functions fine, and you want to relocate it, correct?
Actually, there's a problem with that fuel center itself. It's antiquated, and the MDE, we're just stretching the envelope with that fuel center itself. We're going to have to dig up the tank and plant put new fuel lines in, put new pumps in.
And we have some kind of notices saying we have to do that. I'm just curious.
Yes, yes, we do.
Well, technically, Scott Hobbs is here, and he's familiar with the.
Scott's familiar with the project.
Some of the details of that, and we'd like to look at cost-effective methods to address that. And I think I've talked to Scott today about that, Commissioner Wagner.
Okay.
So he may have more information now, or he might want to report back later. I'm not quite sure.
No, I think it'd be best for sake of time, to report back later. There's been discussion about it then, obviously. So. Yeah, I'm good for now. We'll let Sarah continue. Sorry, Sarah.
Oh, it's no problem.
That's it.
So I could also ask a question about that because I've heard some comments with regards to the fuel center. Might it be possible, not just for the sheriff's department, but for the county down the road, to utilize, maybe can we contract with local fuel companies for a discount and maybe just not have a fueling center of our own and get that discount through local companies since we're buying in bulk? Is that a possibility? Do you know where I'm going with that, where we don't provide the infrastructure ourselves? And I would think for the sheriffs, it might be beneficial to be out in the community, more and.
So my answer for
Yeah.
that would be, we can look into it. I'm not sure exactly what the possibilities of that would be related to the cost discount or pricing structure that we would get. It is something that we could talk to our purchasing director about and see if I can bring back some information for you.
Yeah. And again, so we know where we're going with the maintenance, MD has made reports on it. However, we want to be very careful that we're most cost effectively addressing those. There may be repairs versus replacement, in addition to your question, Commissioner Kiefer.
Just as an opportunity to explore and see if it is cost effective.
Mhm.
Just throughout the day, we've heard our budget's short, and might this be an opportunity to save a little bit of money somewhere?
Okay.
Is the current fueling center in a secure area for the sheriff's? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Sarah, do you know what the price is when we contract out for fuel? Do you know what we get the fuel?
I know that we generally see a 20 to 30 cent reduction in cost compared to regular retail. So we do.
That would be our cost at retail.
What's that?
That would be comparing it to our cost at retail.
Mm-hmm.
So if we were to buy that through local.
If we were to
fueling
purchase
centers,
fuel from AT&T or Sheetz or any other fueling company without a price discount, it would increase our cost if we didn't get some type of pricing.
But we would still be tax exempt on the gas that we seen. I'm sure we're tax exempt.
Well, we pay taxes on gasoline and diesel. We don't pay tax on off-road use for diesel or gas. So.
Well, you'll just give us a little report back.
Sure, I will. Okay. Along with the public safety 10-year plan, you will see that public safety vehicles do amount to $625,000 for fiscal year 2020. There were several projects that had to be moved out due to funding constraints. Patrol Services Relocation Facility was requested, and that has been removed from the plan. This center was requested to move the patrol division of the Sheriff's Office to the Phoenix Color Building. Additional detail can be found on this project in tab 15, page 11. The Detention Center Expansion Project was also requested and removed from the plan due to funding constraints, which involves building a corridor between the Phoenix Color Building and the Detention Center. All in all, do we have any questions on the public safety 10-year plan or any of the projects? Okay. Tab 16 represents the 10-year plan for railroad. There were no major changes to this plan. The 10-year plan cost is $1.4 million for a railroad study and improvements project. Okay, moving right along to road improvement. The 10-year road improvement budget is $92 million, of which $9.4 million is in FY 2020. Major projects do include a $4.8 million for pavement maintenance and rehab, funding for Eastern Boulevard widening Phase 2, a $5.7 million project, Professional Boulevard extended Phase 2, a $4.3 million project, of which $2 million is grant funding. The Valley Mall area road improvements of $250,000, and Halfway Boulevard extended, which has now combined phases 1 and 2 into one project. So if you see on your sheet 17-12 and 17-17, those projects have been consolidated into one.
I didn't see the Professional Boulevard Bridge in there under bridges.
Quite possible it's fully funded already. Is that true? Or it's under road?
So
Under roads.
we're in roads, so
what
it's
we're on.
Professional Boulevard.
Because I've been sitting here today
Prior
trying to.
funding, not in the 10-year plan.
Yeah, I've been sitting here today trying to figure out how we're gonna come up with all this additional funding, and I just made a quick list of things that we're gonna have to be funding here in the future. You know, we have the Cascade debacle up there that we're dealing with. We've got the school board in here for more money. We can't meet their capital needs. We talked about employee pay raises being at rock bottom. We have citizens out in our community that are begging us to blacktop roads. We give them tar and chip, but we can build a bridge over Professional Court. And I guess the point I'm trying to make, I've got some other things here that I'd like to talk about, but I'm tired and it's late. But I wouldn't have a problem just removing that from the CIP. That would give us millions and millions of dollars that we could funnel elsewhere to start securing up our budget for the future. We have spent out there Yale Drive, Edgewood, Robinwood. We've got $35–40 million in those roads out there. We have nothing. You know, we were, when Yale Drive came in here to move forward with that, we talked about a tax base. We haven't collected a penny from it yet. I checked today, Chief pays $800 and some a year in taxes. That really kind of hurts my feelings. 160 some acres, they pay 800 and some, about $850 a year in taxes. So for me, I think it's time we take that money, earmark it elsewhere where it's going to be really needed for the county right now, and that's going to secure up millions and millions of dollars for us. That's going to be my position on that, and I just think it's time to stop that bridge. It's really a bridge to nowhere. When we did, when we moved forward, which I didn't, with that Yale Drive, Senator McCoskey had a $10 million earmark on her desk. Had the county bought that ground, I believe at that time it was like $3.5 million. Had we bought that property, we would have received the earmark. We would have had the road pretty much all the way over to Robinwood. And I don't know why that section of Robinwood back to that roundabout hasn't been completed yet. For the amount of money that it would take to complete that road, here we are spending, we're going to have $15–20 more million in that project. Anyhow, that's going to be my position on the bridge out there at Professional Boulevard.
Okay. To also clarify, the reason you don't see the bridge in your 10-year plan is because it has been funded in the previous year. And so under tab 21, is it still 21 on their books? There is a current CIP report, which does show that on page 21-2. So if you want to look at the funding for that
That
later.
would free up millions and millions of dollars for us. We have the election board here. You know, we're going to be needing 2 election sites here really soon. We need some money. I'm not going to be one to raise taxes. I don't know if the other commissioners want to do that or not, but I'm not going to be one that's going to be in a hurry to raise taxes.
Sarah, how much have we spent on the bridge design and all the reports or survey studies leading?
Yeah, so far, as of January 2019, the Professional Bridge has an $8.8 million budget, and we've spent $1.4 million.
That's for design and MDE and all that type of.
And we already spent that $1 million for the design. $1 million for the design was used with grant funds.
Thank you.
Okay.
If I could comment on that, I wouldn't close the door entirely on the bridge project, but maybe set a metric where once we have some development on that property, maybe 1 or 2 parcels that are developed out that create jobs, build that tax base, maybe then that could be what kickstarts the bridge project. And I would imagine if we have the designs, maybe they need to be updated to some extent, but would you have to start over entirely with the design of the bridge?
Not entirely. However, it is a extremely cumbersome process with Maryland Department of Environment. As Scott said, we've already spent over $1 million of state money. It was considered in a grant funding, so It's slightly different because it was Secretary of Transportation, not the current secretary, but the prior secretary. And it would be incredibly cumbersome. We may have to give back that money. I'm not saying we would or wouldn't, but we would have to be very careful about not carrying through with the construction.
I'd like to find out more, maybe see what our timeline might be on that. I agree. I mean, we have in our plans to widen Eastern Boulevard. We already have widened Robinwood. So those were measures to certainly help with traffic congestion. So I think some valid points are made. And again, what I'm hearing all day long is we have so many important requests. We don't have the money for them necessarily. And it's about priorities, so.
Yeah, and moving forward kind of along those lines with that thought is we really want to make sure too that if we are reducing one-time costs, those funds need to fund one-time costs. We need to be very careful about what we take from our capital plan to fund ongoing operating costs.
It's just not as easy as stopping money. I mean, Terry has a good point. Everybody needs money, but it's just not as easy as saying we're not going to do it, because some of that's probably going to be not our money anyway, right?
And right, some of this is.
Well, it might not be our money, Terry. It could be state money coming to us.
No, it's our money. It's going to be large percentage of it's going to be county money. We've already put $35,000 to $40,000 into that dune boggle out there. We were presented a presentation when they put Yale Drive in, and it showed all of this revenue that we were going to gain. I'd like to go back to, I think it was about 2007. I'd like to revisit that presentation, if that's possible. I would like to see the numbers presented again. I remember at that time, the commissioners were fed hook, line, sinker, bait, everything. I voted no for the project. I knew it was not a good thing for Washington County, or for the taxpayers of Washington County. Mr. Snook, I think someone told me he had referenced in the newspaper he needs an anchor. What better two anchors would you have for Mount Etna Farms than the junior college and the hospital? Maybe he was referring to the anchor, maybe that he was referring to the sinker that the commissioners had taken. Hook, line, sinker. So it was a bad deal from the beginning, in my opinion. We have $40 million. Imagine if we put that toward the debt service that would take. So that's, I'm going to fight to get it out of the budget. We need to free up money. We need to get the money back to the people in Washington County, and we need to take care of all of the requests that are being requested of us right now.
That would also, one of my requests would get rid of the rec center out of the budget too.
And there you go.
Right,
We've got to save money.
Yeah, but the rec center would need to, we have other priorities.
It's already been brought before the CIP committee, and I think we're prepared to do that if the commissioners wish to do that. So there's also another bridge that is out in the western portion of the county, which I believe the commissioners would like to reconsider. Is that correct?
So that's Slab Town?
Which one is that?
Yes, that's fine. I would agree.
Slab Town.
Slab Town. Slab Town is a federal.
It's time we get serious about money, or we're going to be raising taxes.
Okay.
I don't disagree with you a minute. I wasn't here when that all started. I'm just wondering if the money's not already coming from grants or something, or it's actually out of our pocket. That's what I wanted to know.
There are some grants in these roads projects, so if there are specific projects you would like me to address, I can address them now, or I can bring them back. But I'll need to know.
We don't need to do it now, do we?
Bring them back, or let's.
Yeah, we're going to revisit this.
Yeah, let's go. You finish your report. We'll accommodate everybody's request.
Yeah, but I would
we need to take care of our needs, not our wants.
I would like to say that what you've said, Commissioner Wagner, is accurate. It's the Secretary's money in addition to ARC money that's out there. So that needs to be brought to the commissioners with all the information presented, so that we're very careful to move forward, not to lose money on that too.
And that kind of feeds
And
into.
I would like to have staff help us identify some things that we can either move out in years or move out of the CIP.
Okay.
Again, we've got to start being true Republican conservatives and start looking at our money and concentrating on our needs, not our wants.
Okay.
I think you have brought a few things to the CIP committee's attention already, correct? Would you like to list those?
Yes, we have. The rec center certainly did come up as a potential. What was else in that?
The two fuel center
two fuel centers, one out at Highway Western Section and the Sheriff Fuel Center. There was a Western Section shop that came up. Was that? Those were pretty much it. So those were the ones that the CIP committee is currently in discussion, to possibly remove from the plan.
And we've also heard Slabtown.
Slabtown
this
Road
evening,
Bridge.
so.
Okay. The last thought on my statement earlier was that Halfway Boulevard Extended is in our plan. It has a total project cost of $6 million, but total grant funds of $3.8 million. So that's something to consider. Also, I won't get into all the details today, but behind the summary sheet in your books is a detailed account of the funding sources that make up the roads. So you'll be able to see what roads are funded with bonds or what roads are funded with bonds and grant funding. Okay. Other major changes to the road improvement 10-year plan would include Longmeadow Road cost that was actually reduced. The scope was changed from a 5-lane roadway down to a 3-lane roadway. And highway equipment was reduced from what was requested for 2020, however, funded above what was in last year's plan due to requested needs for equipment. Roads projects are supported in part with highway user revenues. Any other questions for roads? Okay. Moving on to one of our enterprise funds, solid waste. The 10-year project cost is $7.4 million, of which $527,000 is for FY 2020. The 40 West truck loading facility is a $500,000 project and needed to provide for efficiency related to leachate removal. At the completion of the project, the solid waste department looks to load the truck in 10 minutes versus the current time of 30 minutes. So that is the purpose of this project. This will allow for more leachate removal throughout the day and was recommended by MDE a few years ago. Major changes from last year include the Rush Road pavement rehabilitation project was actually removed from the plan. 40 West partial capping was also removed from the plan. These were removed based on just changing priorities and funding constraints. Transfer station upgrades were also removed from the plan and will be reevaluated at a later date. The total savings of these projects being removed is $4.3 million. Any questions on solid waste projects? Okay. Moving on to transit, 10-year cost is $8.8 million with $1.4 million in 2020. No major changes in this category. Transit projects are funded 80% federal, 10% state, 10% local. The FY 2020 projects total $1.4 million with the local contribution of $135,000. Any questions for transit? Okay. Moving on to water quality. Projects in the utility fund did not change from last year. Only had one modification from the CIP committee, which was to reduce the contingency project due to funding limitations within the enterprise fund. The county is reducing everywhere it can to reduce the current and future cost for these water quality funds. The sewer fund is shown in the next tab. The capacity management project, or not the next tab, next page. The capacity management project is an $8.8 million project located in the Morgansville area and will construct a new regional pump connected to the county's gravity collection system. Once this is complete and operational, Morgansville, Morgan's Meadows, Garden Spot, and Freedom Hill pump stations will be taken offline. Another large project in 2020 is the Smithsburg wastewater treatment plant upgrade. It is shown in the plan that you have in front of you at a cost of $3.9 million. Since this plan was developed, further developments have occurred, and the cost has actually increased substantially to $7.4 million, mainly related to regulations on effluent ammonia limits And if you have further questions on that, I'd be happy to defer to Dan DeVito. Okay. And the following page represents projects for the water fund. Major changes here include pushing back water system improvements and removing any allocation to contingency. Also, the water main replacement project was reduced significantly from a cost of $4 million to $866,000. This project will replace aging water mains in various distribution systems. The cost reduction is due to a reevaluation of the water main in Route 550, which has now been determined not to be replaced. Any questions for water quality projects? Again, as I stated earlier on tab 21, you have a listing of the current CIP report as of January, if you need that for reference. And if there aren't any other questions, we can
Commissioners,
conclude.
any questions for staff?
I do have a question on debt. For every 10 million we'll just do 10 million. So every 10 million we borrow, we pay it back over 20 years.
That's correct.
So on $10 million, what would our annual cost be on $10 million?
Oh, on 1 million, we pay about 75,000. I would say around $1 million.
I'm not holding you to that now. I'm just
Okay.
That's an approximate.
Yeah. So if
It wouldn't actually probably be that much because if we look at the.
I understand.
Okay.
So I guess the point I was trying to make, we would easily be having an additional $5 to $7 million added to our budget if we wouldn't have put all of the money into that Yale Drive out there and this bridge. And I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. So we've got to start being smart with our money. And that was just a little bit of a comparison that I was making.
Okay.
Rather than spend money on roads and so forth, certain roads.
Yeah, I think that estimate I threw out was definitely high, but I understand your
Generate
point.
some additional revenue for the county.
Right.
Any other questions, commissioners? Hearing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Finish.
We got nothing outside out there. Nothing.
Next, sex offender compliance and Maryland grant approval, I believe. Cody, is Cody still here?
Cody's not here?
Yes.
Please
evening,
introduce
everyone.
yourself. Thank you for being here.
I'm Stephanie Laypole, Senior Grant Manager with the Office of Grant Management, and here with me this evening is Cody Miller, Quartermaster Grants Manager for Washington County Sheriff's Office. We are seeking approval for the submission of the grant application for the fiscal year 20 Sex Offender Compliance and Enforcement Maryland Grant to the Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention in the amount of $27,276 and to accept funding as awarded. The Washington County Sheriff's Office plans to utilize the funding provided to fund the salaries of 2 part-time civilian employees who assist the sex offender register with the register and re-register of sex offenders while also conducting compliance checks of employment as well as home addresses. The Office of Grant Management has reviewed the grant guidelines. Matching funds or in-kind support is not required. The grant is annually recurring, and there are no unusual conditions or requirements attached to the acceptance of the grant. If awarded, the grant reduces costs associated with the sex offender registration program by $27,276. If funding was lost, the Sheriff's Office would prepare a budget proposal for the county commissioners to either hire 1 full-time employee or to try to maintain the 2 part-time positions. Deputies may possibly be used to verify address checks while the registrar continued with the registrations and re-registrations, while also working with the Criminal Investigation Division for violations. Are there any questions?
Is this a renewable grant every year?
Every year, yes, sir.
So it's nothing that expires 3, 4, 5 years from now and the county has to pick it up?
Nope.
Commissioners, any questions? If not, do I have a motion to accept?
Motion to accept.
Second.
Second, first and second, discussion. Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Next up, Planning Assistance to States Program Grant Phase 4. Stephanie Lapel, welcome back.
Thank you. Again,
Dan
I'm Stephanie
DeVito.
Lapel, Senior Grant Manager for the Office of Grant Management, and here with me this evening is Dan DeVito, Division Director for Division of Environmental Management. We are seeking approval for the acceptance of the award from the United States Army Corps of Engineers in the amount of $70,000. The proposed funding is for completion of Phase 4 of the Urbanized Area Stormwater Infrastructure Mapping Project with the United States Army Corps of Engineers Baltimore District. The project will enable the county to work towards compliance with the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, MS4 Phase 2 General Permit by mapping and inventorying its stormwater drainage systems within the urbanized area. The Office of Grant Management has reviewed the grant guidelines. There is a 50-50 match requirement, which is covered by the Engineering and Construction Stormwater Retrofit CIP budget for DNG 039. Are there any questions?
Commissioners, any questions?
I think you could see the results of the first 3 years of this program is already online, that we have an actual map that comes up on the webpage that has all of this stuff that has been mapped and by the Army Corps of Engineers, and it's pretty impressive. And as Stephanie said, it helps to go for us to meet compliance with the MS4 permit.
Make a motion to accept.
All in favor, or questions? Questions, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Next up, Susan Small. Resolution for Blair Materials.
Good evening, Commissioners. Susan Small, Director of Business Development. I'm here to make a recommendation this evening to approve the resolution for endorsement of the State of Maryland's $120,000 MEDAF loan and to provide a county $120,000 matching conditional loan. The State of Maryland Department of Commerce, under the Maryland Economic Development Assistance Authority, has agreed to conditionally loan Blair Materials Incorporated, or an entity acceptable to the department as the company, in the amount of $120,000 from the Maryland Economic Development Assistance Fund, otherwise known as the MEDAF. The MEDAF loan proceeds will be used by the company to establish its headquarters and manufacturing operations at 100 Tandy Drive in Washington County. Anticipated total project costs associated with the project at the project site will be $70 million, and we further understand that the company will hire at least 40 full-time permanent employees at the project site by December 31st of 2020. In accordance with the Maryland Code Economic Development Article Section 5-319D, the county is required to endorse the making of the MEDAF loan for the project and approve the required local match. Are there any questions?
Commissioners, questions?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second? Second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, I'll say aye if in favor. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have requests for administrative leave for county employees working as election judges. Mr. Barry Jackson, welcome, sir, and your friends in the back.
Good evening. Thanks for letting us be here this evening. I'm Kay Rabusi.
And I'm Barry Jackson.
And with us are our board president, Bruce Field, our vice president, Tammy Downing, and our board member, Marty Lum. I'm going to ask Barry to address this first one about the administrative leave, because he's been working on this.
Thank you, commissioners, for letting us speak about this. Every election cycle, we struggle to get enough election workers. We typically have about 600 election judges that are spread out over 49 polling places around the county on election day, during the primary and during the general election. We've had some developments recently that actually are going to even increase our needs for election judges. Same-day registration was on the ballot in 2018. It passed overwhelmingly in the state. And so with that is going to come the need for more election judges. We're going to need to have someone dedicated to just doing registrations on election day when voters come in who aren't registered. So that's an additional 49 right there. We're also going to need to have greeter judges at each polling place to identify who needs to get registered, who's already registered, and they can put them in the right line. So that's another 49 that we're going to need. So now we're up to another 100 election judges we'll need in 2020. We have had, for years, state employees get administrative leave from the state if they work as election judges. And there are also, and I believe you have this in your packets, 12 counties, 12 jurisdictions, 11 counties in the city of Baltimore who also provide administrative leave for their workers who work as election judges. And in addition, there's legislation currently being considered down at the General Assembly to actually require that of all counties, of all jurisdictions, to have their employees get administrative leave for working as election judges. But we wanted to bring this to you, I guess, to get ahead of that. The legislation does look like it has a good chance of passing in this session, but we wanted to bring it before you because there really is no fiscal impact to allow administrative leave for your employees. It's just a scheduling situation. You know, obviously you don't want to have all of your county workers working as election judges. You need to have coverage, you know, in all of your departments. But I think it would be a nice thing to allow that as an option. We've actually had some county employees have told us that they would be election judges if this was something that was offered. So we're just requesting that the county commissioners make that a possibility.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions? Discussion?
It seems to me that with the new rules and some of the things coming up, that I want the elections monitored very close of who votes and how they're registered and are they legal to vote. So I think that anything check and balance I could come up with to make sure that happens, I'm good with.
I think it's important. The election we're coming up when these new changes take place is a presidential election, and it's likely to be a very popular, important presidential election, as they all are. But each subsequent 4 years, it gets more important, more important. But we've been having some record turnout at some of our elections, and good turnout, I think. I've worked at the elections, and it's not an easy job for the little pay that you get and the long day that you put in, kind of like today. But I think we need to do something here. So I agree.
You got paid pretty well today. You got birthday cake.
Got birthday cake, Wayne, yeah.
And chocolate milk.
I just want to make comment that MACO is actually supporting this legislation on the state level. So I think that's important just to take as a reference.
Commissioners, any more discussion? If not, is there a motion to support?
I motion to support it.
Second available. First and second, any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Before you leave, I've been told to announce that we have a celebrity in the audience. Former retired county clerk Vicki Lohm. Shout out back there for the record. Yeah, you're in there, yay. Thank you all very much. Next, we'll have Maryland General Assembly legislation requiring multiple voting sites. Kate Rebucci, Barry Jackson, welcome back.
Thank you. And I actually have an additional handout here.
I stole that line from Terry Baker. Welcome back.
You tell me about it.
Okay. Make sure I got the right thing here. Okay. House Bill 79 has been introduced, which also looks like it has an excellent chance of passing, which would change the requirement for early voting centers in certain counties. The current law is that if you're under 125,000 registered voters in your county, you only are required to have one early voting site. This new legislation would change it down to 100,000 registered voters. We had given you some information about that, about how many registered voters we currently have, and that was actually incorrect because we were using a number of active and inactive voters because we thought that was the right number. It's actually active voters only. And so that handout that I just gave to you is, it shows the progression of active voters in our county since 2015. And I use September because September of 2019 is when we're going to have to make a decision about how many early voting sites we're going to have. And so if you look at the projected numbers, these are very conservative numbers. I believe we're going to be over this, but we'll be at over 97,000 active registered voters at September of 2019 when we have to make that decision whether we go to 1 or 3 early voting sites. Certainly by election day, we're going to be over 100,000 voters. And so if this legislation passed, we'll be required to go to 3 early voting sites. So really, we're just bringing this to your attention just to know that this is coming down the pike. We actually, in our budget, had requested an additional early voting site. This was before we knew that this was even coming. But it may happen that within fiscal year 2020, we will have to have 3 early voting sites.
Because we also have automatic registration going into effect July 1st.
Mm-hmm.
And so we really do believe that our active registration is going to increase, and we will be at that over the 100,000 by the election.
Right, and that's why I think that this is a very conservative number that we've put in here, because this really doesn't take into account the automatic voter registration that'll come into effect on July 1st. And what that is if you go to any state agency and to do any kind of a transaction, whatever it might be, the MVA or DHMH, whatever it might be, you will automatically be registered to vote if you're not already. You have to opt out. They don't even give the option of asking, do you want to register to vote? You'll automatically be registered to vote. So we believe that that will increase our numbers pretty significantly after July 1st.
Is that July 1st of this year?
This year, that's correct. It's when it goes in effect. It passed in last year's General Assembly. So
what does that mean in terms of cost to the county?
Well, what did we put in for the second? About 8,000.
For additional early voting, 2 additional early voting sites.
You'd only need 1. You already have 1. So
We have 1, but if this bill passes, we would have to have 3. So we'd have to have 2 more early voting sites. So I put in $8,000, $4,000 for each additional early voting site just to rent, because we are thinking about something probably down South County and then either to the west or to the east area for an additional site.
For each additional site, or 8,000 to 10,000 for both sites?
I put in 8,000 for the 2 additional sites.
Plus equipment, right?
And that's just the lease, plus then additional voting equipment you'd have to factor in, and the election workers themselves.
And isn't there's also a bill about the early voting hours being opened earlier at 8 a.m. instead of just 10 a.m.?
Correct. In the general election, that's correct. So, and just to clarify, we actually don't have any early voting sites right now. We don't own a property where we have early voting, so we've always had to rely on the good graces of other organizations, and right now we don't have a commitment from anybody for early voting in 2020. So we do not have an early voting center right now.
So can you have 2 voting, if the bill passes, do they dictate how far the voting sites have to be?
Yes, they're pretty specific about making sure they're in a concentrated area of population. So Obviously, Hagerstown, we'd want to have one there.
You can't have two in the same building.
No.
We're looking at South County and West County.
Right. Any other questions about that? I mean, we really didn't have anything we wanted you to do about that. We just wanted to bring it to your attention. So.
Okay, anything else? on that? It looks like you're up again for the Bond Election Board facility. Welcome back. You may proceed.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, we're here to, again, talk about the request, the need for a combined facility for the election board, for our office, warehouse, early voting and training facility. I believe it was mentioned in a couple meetings ago. And so we have, of course, over the years, been in conversation, different places. And so, as we have requested, we wanted to continue the conversation and with your support. And along with that, we believe that there is a location that we would like to, if possible, move forward with. And it was mentioned in the agenda report form, which is the Shop and Save out on Virginia Avenue. And so we did go and survey or look at the place last Friday, and we feel that it does meet all of our needs, current needs, future needs for growing, what you've heard us talk about this evening as far as the requirements that are coming down from the state. And to have a facility where everything is in one place, because we do spend a lot of time just packing, loading, moving, unpacking, taking things out, organizing. And just as Barry said, we don't have an early voting site. We don't have a training site for our election judges yet. And it just has become such a burden, a lot of work for us to not only pack all the equipment and supplies, but every time we need to now go find a place, looking at it, surveying it for training needs or for early voting purposes, that it has always been our desire to have everything in one location so that we're not caught at the last minute looking for a place to have a recount. Thank goodness, we had 101 Tandy back in 2016, that we could have our recount there. We would not have had a place had there been a recount in 2018, or even for training. And again, just to be able to have things set up, ready to go, knowing that we have areas available for the requirements that we have, whether it be a recount or for training. Now we have manual audit that we're doing this week. That's something new that came down from the state where we bring people in from the outside. So we do need larger areas to be able to test and train and do a lot of these things that the state's requiring of us. It was asked if we, had this larger area, would we, be able to use some of those large rooms like early voting for other departments to use. And certainly if it wasn't an election year when we needed it, then of course we would be glad to do that, because we understand for our elections, it's kind of like seasonal things, that we have, like recreational things. Elections are every other year, but we need those areas for training and testing and everything. Pretty much something's going on all the time, whether it's an election year or not. And so we've come to you to see how we could best move forward.
Commissioners, comments, questions?
So what's being proposed here, it looks like a lease. My question for staff, would that property remain on the tax roll since it's being used for a lease commercial purpose?
It would, however, the lease, obviously the tax would be rolled into the lease, so.
The owner of the property would pay the tax via the lease.
Yeah, but that's with all leases.
What's that?
That's with all leases.
Absolutely.
Incorporated.
Absolutely it is.
What would be the projected cost of a build-out? Would that be ours, or that would be the owner of the property?
Build out to this property. That would be at the square footage, which you are at 20, is that what you?
32,000.
22?
32.
32? Obviously, not all of that would be completely fitted out with walls, but it would be fairly considerable of several dollars per square foot.
Who would pay for that? Is that something we'd ask the landlord to do, or?
Again, it could be structured either way. We could do it. Staff can do some very limited amount of that type of work. We did just see the budget. We do have 600,000 in the budget, so that's what we have now.
It's old shop and save, correct?
Right.
And I'm sure they're gonna, the codes are gonna make somebody spend a lot of money to get it up to be able to use it, right? Is that what we're saying? And I don't know if they're gonna make you sprinkler it and ADA and all that, I guess. But I guess that would just be part of the negotiations on
It would. It's probably largely ADA. It may have to come into further compliance because of when it was built, and I would fully assume it's sprinklered
sprinkled.
now. Yeah.
Yeah, but it has the loading docks that are required for us moving the equipment. We use those large black transportation carts, and it was frightening watching them unload those black carts over at the Board of Ed on a lift gate truck. I mean, loading docks is what we need, to safely just be able to transport the equipment and get it on and off the truck. But that's just some of the things that, as far as location, the size, the docks, would just meet our growing needs.
So this location would be able to facilitate an early voting location for Hagerstown. It wouldn't be an additional third. So if we only had one space, would it be able to qualify for that one space?
Yes.
It would.
so we'd maybe need 2 more spaces because that's gonna work. Yeah. I was gonna ask a question, I forgot what it was. Getting late. So, yeah, it is.
So that's a 20-year lease, so that comes out to about $3.6 million. So what could we build for $3.6 million? I don't know. What do we have? Do we have any space available that the county uses?
I think we've been through a full inventory previously, and I'm not sure we have a location that would suit you as well as this site. We had this discussion last week. This has been a long week already, so I think it was last week we had this discussion. Or was it yesterday?
It was yesterday.
It was yesterday. We had this discussion about the various costs we would have to add up, and it would either be...
We have him beat up pretty good.
It has been a long day. We would have to look at the sale or lease cost. We would have to look at the property value or property tax. We would have to look at the maintenance of the building. I think you said it's the original roof. 1992 it was built. So it's probably about due for a roof.
Things like that be negotiated in the lease?
Oh, easily, and then you're just paying a higher payment.
Yep,
Well,
absolutely.
if we don't lease it, they're gonna have to put a roof on it anyhow. That shouldn't be our responsibility.
Do we need that many square feet, or is that overkill?
No, we need it. And because of the things that we just discussed,
Right.
The need for additional early voting sites, we need more storage space. The same-day registration requires more equipment. So whereas we used to need maybe about 12,000 warehouse square footage, now we're up to about 20,000. So
I'm all right with looking at this, but I don't think there's enough information of, what the lease is going to be. I guarantee there's going to be some type of increased rider on this thing. Are we going to have to do a new roof? I mean, there's so many different things to go. I think we just need to go further down before we can even take this into consideration. I think it's a good step one, but we've got to get much further down the road to see if this is even feasible.
That price that you've requested, is that a price that was quoted to us, or is that just an assumption, a good guess on your part?
The lease amount.
Talking about the lease amount that we put in, the 180,000, is that what we're talking about?
You're talking about in my operating budget, 180,000.
Yeah, is that what the lease is?
I used that from some numbers we had for, I think the old A&P in the South End, and just used 15,000 a month and came up with 180,000.
We haven't really got an amount from the landowner for the,
no.
It could be less.
Just a question. I think we heard from the Washington County Public Schools today that there'll be some schools becoming available, but you remember the time frame on that, Rob? How soon they'll be coming available?
Because you raise taxes and provide the money.
Yeah.
We build them a new one.
That's right. Well, no, we're way far. We're what, 3 or 4 years out?
I didn't pick up on the time frame.
You're talking about the two elementary schools going to one.
Hickory and
That would probably be in the 3 to 5 year.
3 to 5 year.
Sharpsburg won't be built for 2, and that Sharpsburg, the existing one gets removed, so that's not an additional building.
Right. Okay.
What I'm hearing, gentlemen, you want some.
Looking for a building, buddy.
numbers to come back. I'm not against the site, but I'd like to see more number figures. I
That's
ride by there
fine.
all the time. It's centrally located.
I'd like to explore the idea. We need more information, but I'd like to explore it in a bit more detail. I think it's promising. The last thing I want, and I have every bit of confidence in our election board. I served with some of you folks up there. You do a great job. But it could be a hassle if you have a recount. I don't want to be Broward County for the struggles that they faced, and some of it was probably because of the people involved. But you don't want to be in a situation where you might have to move ballots from a building and to do a recount because you don't have space. You need to go to another space. That's going to create a whole
That is
host of issues.
correct.
So this could help with the integrity of our election.
Right. And as an example, in the 2018 general election, that's what we had to do. We had to take our absentee ballots, which were in our office, and move them out to the warehouse so we could do the canvass. And so we had sheriff's deputies, actually escort us while we took those ballots up there. So,
Gentlemen, what I'm hearing is we get a little more information. Mr. Slocum, could you assign staff to bring that info?
now, a question for the commissioners: would you want to see just lease? Would you want to see purchase? Would you want to see both, like all scenarios, or?
Get with Rob, well,
Okay.
Both. Let's look at both.
get with staff and have them kind of put something together as to what they think we would be looking for.
Okay.
The other question is, do you know who owns the building?
We've been in touch with the real estate agent. Super Value, right? It was a Super Value? Yeah, it just says Shop and Save East Property LLC is what it says right now, but yeah.
I just have one more question. How much have you really looked? Did it just sort of pop up and you say, this is it?
It did kind of pop up, to be quite honest with you. But,
Isn't there several of those vacant around?
Yes, and this is the only one that really would meet our needs because the others are located in retail shopping centers where we would share the space, whereas with this one, it's standalone, has its own parking lot, own loading dock and everything. To say it did just pop up is not really true because as soon as it went vacant, then we kind of thought about it. So we've been kind of keeping an eye on it. But there are other properties too that we're actually looking at, but this is the one that really is the number one choice for us. So we didn't want to bring any others up to you until we looked at this one.
As far as I can tell, we had started this conversation and started looking at places back in 2013 from my notes. And so, yes, we have looked at places over the years. And so, but we think this one would really meet our growing needs. And so thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks. Opposed? Thank you very much. And Kay, again, regrets for the passing of your aunt, who for 30 years worked at the election board. Rose to the top there.
Thank you.
Dot Waters.
Did you see your life remembered?
Oh my gosh, the pictures are great.
Thank
All
you
right,
very
thank
much.
you. Next up, Proposed Building Code Review Committee, Mr. Eichelberger. And I see, I think Mr. Quillen's coming in behind you. Good evening, gentlemen, and Mr. Alloway, good evening.
Good evening, Commissioners. Rich Eichelberger, Director of Construction, also County Code Official. I have with me this evening Frank Quillen, who is our Chief Plans Examiner and Deputy Code Official, and Ashley Holloway, who is the Director of the Division of Plan Review and Permitting. If you recall, we were here several weeks ago to talk about the proposed Building Code Review Committee. We are here this evening to ask for you to move to approve the proposed Building Code Review Committee to assist in the review of the 2018 building codes in preparation for local adoption. The 2018 code adoption, as required by the state of Maryland, includes state building performance standards and Washington County local code amendments. Local amendments allow for some modifications to the new codes to meet local conditions and for consistency and coordination with customers as well as the external agencies. Local amendments will be the result of the work of this committee. The state of Maryland is scheduled to adopt the Maryland Building Performance Standards to become effective March 1st, but it looks like that's going to be delayed a little bit. We're still hearing that it's still supposed to happen sometime in March. As I said, we appeared before the board on January 15th to request the formation of the Code Review Committee to aid in the review of the new building codes. This committee will provide the review of the state adopted codes and provide recommendations to the commissioners for final approval, including local amendments. The goal is to have this process completed for adoption and implementation by the end of this year, 2019. The committee will consist of various government design and construction representatives to propose. The purpose of the review is to consider safety, consistency, common sense, and customer service across agencies as it relates to Washington County. As previously stated, the plumbing, mechanical, and electrical codes will be reviewed by the members of their respective boards. Again, today we are here to request the committee as presented. There also is an attachment that has the list of the Code Review Committee as proposed. All the members have been contacted and have agreed to assist the county with this endeavor.
You did use the words common sense. I hope they common sense and doing their evaluations and bringing information back to the commissioners.
Yes, sir.
I know
There's
a lot of overkill.
That has been our direction for a number of years, is to try to find that delicate balance sometimes of protecting life safety versus economical standpoints and things of that nature. So everyone's very cognizant of that, and they'll be reminded of that as well. So
maybe when you bring that information to the commissioners, you can bring some safety information. Some accidents have happened out in the county as a result of.
Yes, sir. We'll consider that. We'll make that part of the presentation as well. If there's,
we'll get this information, the code changes and what they're going to be recommending.
Yes, sir.
A couple of weeks before we.
Yes, sir. I have a proposed timeline laid out, and we are hoping to have the actual code review completed by very early fall, if not very late summer. Then that would allow enough time for it to go to the county attorney's office for their review and concurrence, get it all corrected if there's anything needs to be fine-tuned there, and then several weeks for the commissioners to also, we would present it and then have the several weeks that you would have to review it and then propose to take it to public meeting, and as it normally plays out. So, but like I said, I have a very aggressive schedule proposed so that we can go through this, get it taken care of, get it before the commissioners, so that you do have enough time to look at it, and we have enough time to make changes if necessary.
Any other questions for anybody, or just as the motion to remove the committee to review? Correct? All right.
I make the motion.
Well, I assume you're approving its constitution as presented.
To go to, where it says, approve the code committee to assist in the review of the 2018 building codes.
Oh, right, and they've identified who is going to be.
Yeah,
yes.
the committee too.
They got it.
Right.
So I make the motion to approve the committee and the members as presented.
Second.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you.
You know, one adjustment, we're gonna bring Debbie Payton in for some, Debbie, you're still here? Yeah. JVL, please be patient. Thank you for your courtesy there. Debbie, thank you. Good evening.
I'm Deb Payton from Director of Health and Human Services, and I bring forward today the Emergency Communication Shift Specialist in the Emergency Services Department. It's a grade 12, step 1, $47,341. This vacancy is due to termination of an employee. It's a full-time position, and it was advertised in both the internal and external advertisements. The interview panel met, and they wish to hire Angelina Latini for this position.
Commissioners?
Need a concurrence or?
12 and under, we don't need a vote, correct?
Right.
Concurrence.
Okay. The next position is an MEO2 Central Sections, grade 7, step 1, $32,219. This vacancy is due to the promotion of the former employee. It is a full-time position and it is budgeted. The interview panel met, and they would like to offer the job to Jonathan Ritchie Martin.
Okay, grade 7, concurrence.
Concurrence.
The next position is also an MEO2 position in Central Section, grade 7, step 1, $32,219. This vacancy was due to the retirement of an employee. It is a full-time position. It was budgeted, and the interview panel would like to select Tyler Schaefer for this position.
Concurrence.
All right, I have one more. An MEO2 in the Southern Section, grade 7, step 1, $32,219. This vacancy was due to the resignation of the former employee. It is a full-time position. It was also budgeted, and they would like to hire Ralph Lewis to this position.
Concurrence.
Concurrence.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Cascade Town Center Development. Folks, thank you for waiting.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for having us today.
Good evening.
Scheduled for 8:10. We're running a little behind. Thank you for your patience.
No problem. My name is Joe Lee, the Director of Operations with JG Business Link International. Here with me today is Dr. Wook Chung, our IT specialist, Mr. Jeffrey Hamburger, our Vice President and Senior Counsel, and Mr. Greg Murray from Washington Village Management. We would like to give you an update on the Cascade Town Center Development Plan for 2019. There are a lot more information that we would like to present, but trying to be time sensitive. We would like to jump through and just go directly into the development plan. And I'll turn that over to Dr. Jung to explain more. And then afterwards, I'd like to present the trip itinerary that we have planned for March 2019 and request for our budget and your approval for that. Thank you.
Let me start with the 2019 development plan for Cascade Town Center Development Project. So as a master developer, JGBLI is working with licensed real estate professional to list the Cascade Town Center property for sale and lease. That includes 519-acre mixed-use property and 63-acre mixed-use property and existing building structure that currently Cascade Town Center have. For the 519-acre mixed-use development, JGBLI is actively promoting the development opportunity to investors who are willing and able to comprehensively develop the Cascade Town Center. At the same time, as a master developer, we are evaluating all investors' development plan to ensure that their plans are fit within the master plan of the Cascade Town Center. Cascade Town Center will be developed with kick-started with the 36 townhome at the lakefront property. In partnership, Fox & Associate and WFD Lauer & Son, we are expecting site work at the Cascade Town Center soon for the 36 townhomes. And there will be another Kickstarter for the development project, which is brand name hotel. So we'll have 3-star hotel with 8 to 100 keys at the Cascade Town Center, and it'll be constructed on the lakefront property at the north end of the lake. And by utilizing former dining hall at the Cascade Town Center, we will have International Food Hall, which is a cluster of specialty restaurant that can provide quality well-being food at an affordable price. And the Lakeside Hall, former officers club at the Cascade Town Center, will be utilized for upscale seafood restaurant. And an about 1 acre outdoor area next to the Lakeside Hall will be renovated for outdoor seating, a music performance stage, and a playground. And 2 warehouses next to the lake will be converted into boutique hotel, event hall, and marketplace that accommodate an authentic American restaurant, a brewery, a winery, and shops, and etc. And the buildings in the historic district will be converted, will be used for the university campus. So former Skip building will be used as a university main building for staffs, faculties, and students. And 35 finger buildings will be utilized for student housing for domestic and international students. And since Cascade area and surrounding counties have rich military histories, we are utilizing 3 buildings in the historic district at the Cascade Town Center, including the castle, to convert to the military memorial and museum. And former commissary building will be used for business incubator for Chang'an Global Corporation for its 50 members companies to expand their businesses into at the Cascade Town Center. And in partnership with Wellspan Health, formerly known as Summit Health, Cascade Town Center will have healthcare institute, whether either by utilizing existing building structure, former senior youth center, or the constructing new building at the 6th Street lakefront property. And 10-acre parcel, including former PX building, will be used for research and development center at the Cascade Town Center. We are working with the Utilex company, a biopharmaceutical research company, to establish their research and development center at the Cascade Town Center. So last item is the resort community. about 20-acre site next to the lake will have resort with 5-star hotels and entertainment center. And a 40-acre area surrounding those 20-acre resorts will offer 120 units of single home that has a resort-style community. And that is our 2019 development plan.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions regarding the development plan that we have currently? No? Okay, then I'd like to jump right into the itinerary that we're aiming for mid-March to late March for us to attend. We're planning a 2-week trip. The first meetings that we would have to establish is one with the Crane Central Government to further the progress on the review that they have for the GICC request that we made in September of 2018. Next, we have a fairly significant investor that we are trying to attract to the Cascade Town Center. It's the IFBC, or the IF Group, and the SIBC International. This corporation is involved with a large investment dollar fund that they are looking to spend anywhere up to $350 million US for investment purposes, and we are trying to attract them in to significantly develop a large portion of the Cascade Town Center. Next, we have the Chang'an Clover Corporation that we have to continue our conversations with to make sure that our discussions are there to attract them and continue their development of bringing in the 15 businesses that they already have. And next, to also meet with the Chang'an County government. That way we can continue the sister county relationship that Washington County has with the county, with Chang'an County in Korea. Following up with Utilex, we want to continue the discussion with them to make sure that they're attracted and still interested in the Cascade Town Center. Both the president and vice president separately visited the Cascade Town Center, one in September 2018 and one just last month. And then we have the Kukje Consulting. Kukje Consulting is working with one of the largest retailers in Korea. They are interested in trying to attract this retailer to invest into the resort and retail portions of the themes that we have at the Cascade Town Center with an interest of about $100 million. We also have Vision LTech, who is a consulting group for a large brand name and also boutique hotel investors. They are also very well connected with the healthcare industry and medical groups in Korea. And with them, we'll be able to attract more EB5 investors as well. So we would be discussing with them and also having seminars to continue the attraction for investment dollars to be sent over to the Cascade Town Center. Along with universities that we'll be meeting with, one is Hanbat National University, who is still interested in creating a satellite campus. Another is the Chungbuk National University Hospital and the CTCF2, again, meeting with the continuation of WellSpan and the conversations that we had to bring in the medical center, along with Wonguang University, who is also interested in developing an Asian Medicine Research Institute. Then we will also follow up with our meetings with the M+, which is the Korean Military Mutual, or the Korean Military Pension Fund, to discuss their investment of $100 million to the resort area that they were originally planning for. Next is McKinley Holdings, who is also a large investment holder that is also looking to the resort and retail portions. And the KSCC, which is another group that is representing an investor for the healthcare and medical groups that they represent, and also the War Memorial of Korea to help establish the Fort Ritchie Military Memorial that we are planning to have at the Cascade Town Center. Are there any questions about the trip that we are proposing?
Questions? Comments?
No, I don't. I don't have any questions.
Sounds like we're going to take the matter under review, so not to hold you, but thank you for your patience here today. We're
Appreciate your time.
Extraordinary day.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Everyone get home safely. Thank you for your time.
Seeing no one else in the audience or anything else on for our agenda, a motion to adjourn, please. I hear a motion. Do I hear a second? To adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
How comes they didn't, how comes they didn't mention the price? The price, like.